Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and by paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Lifestyle Committee meeting of the 15th of March, and I declare this meeting open at 9 a.m. I'd like to advise attendees in the room that the meeting is being webcast and audio recorded. As there are no leaves of absence to report, I note that Councillor Hall is not in the room, but I understand he's in the building and will be joining us soon. We'll get straight underway. Councillors, do you have any declarations of conflicts of interest that you wish to share? There being none, I'll now move straight into the reports on today's agenda, and it actually gives me great pleasure to welcome the newly appointed Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager, Mr Ben O'Brien, to the chair. So through the Director, I'd ask Ben to present his report 5.1 Bishop Street Park Draft Concept. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Mr Mayor, and good morning, councillors. The report before you today includes a high-level draft plan for the redevelopment of the Bishop Street Park in accordance with Council's resolution from July 2022 last year. The Stage 2 plan, as we've termed it, is a long-term vision for the site and developed from extensive community engagement and feedback. It includes features like water park, ninja exercise, circuit fitness equipment, tree trail access paths and nature playgrounds, and that's very much what the community had come back to us from that extensive engagement. Furthermore, in response to a council resolution from November 2022 that requested a report outlining potential future uses of the beach entry pool facility as part of a stage master planning process for Bishop Street Park, we have included an interim or a plan called a Stage 1 plan in the report for your consideration that would see the beach entry pool repaired and reinstated for the remainder of its useful life, whilst the program pool would remain to be closed permanently and obviously as part of those works demolished and made good. You'll see on that Stage 1 plan that there are some minor embellishment works to support the beach entry pool in the interim use, again until its end of useful life. On that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any questions? Thank you. Sorry, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Just a question in regard to the figures that has been presented in the report regarding the revenue on the estimated ongoing operational costs. You've actually got actuals in regard to the fully operational of both pools, 68,000, and you've got 41,000 for the single pool operation. I guess that's the beach. How do you come to that conclusion? Because obviously this is pie in the sky predictions. I realise you've got to come up with something, but the scenario is that you'll only have one facility. Would there be, and would you be actually reducing the fee because you're only operating one facility? What's the fee structure going to be if the beach is the only thing in operation?
Thank you for the question, Mr Mayor. You are correct, it is an estimation of what the likely operating costs and revenue will be for the beach entry pool if it were to be reinstated on its own. To try and come up with some numbers, we've trolled back through some old data to understand what usage looked like between the program pool and the beach entry pool. So typically it was a summer-only pool and schools would use both pools. Now, in understanding what its future use would look like, there would either have to be a prolonged school usage or a reduced number of schools because of insufficient time slots available from the revenue perspective. The beach entry pool still has a lot of family and casual use, but we acknowledge in those figures as well that we would most likely have reduced lap swimmers. Lap swimmers were quite commonly using the program pool. The program pool was often used to be booked out for functions as well, and they may not be an option anymore. So I've tried to understand what did the booking of functions look like, number of lap swimmers, to try and come up with an estimated figure of what the loss of revenue may be. but it is very much that, Mr Mayor, as you suggested, it is an estimation on our part. On the flip side, in the figures that you'll have seen, the expenses have only reduced by our estimation by 20%, because there are still, by having two pools instead of one, you do receive the benefit of an economy of scale. In this instance, in peak periods, instead of having 4 staff rostered, we would have to have a minimum of 3 staff rostered. So we only get a bit of a reduction in our expenses there. All the mowing costs will still be there. The maintenance costs will largely still be there. Electricity costs might reduce ever so slightly, but we don't get the equal impact of revenue to expenses when we reduce just the one pool.
I have a number of questions. In regard to that, and I understand you have to make a line in the sand on those predictions, but did you also, and obviously this is an ongoing issue because, as you know, we're going to build a 50-metre pool in Bentley, and I believe that there's going to be a splash play area in that facility as well. Did you draw a line to suggest that we're going to leave even more revenue down the line, because obviously families are not going to, they're obviously going to source out the better facility, and this Bentley will be a newer facility. It'll have 2 pools. It'll have a play area for the kids. Did you calculate that, or you just drew a line in the sand and built it on what's going to happen today?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've built our prediction based on the data we had. It's a very good assessment of trying to understand what the catchment or what the people may do in regards to the new Bentley pool, but we had no data to try and build into this estimation. So the estimation is built on our existing data without taking into consideration any loss of revenue that might be moved from Eagleby to Bentley in the future.
What I'll do is I'll hand it back to you, Madam Chair, because someone else may ask some questions, but I will want to talk about this later.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I will allow the Area Councillor to have closing remarks, so I'll put you just ahead of the Area Councillor. Thank you. I've got a question from Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much to you, Madam Chair. Ben, thanks very much for the report, and to the officers, thanks very much for the report. The Divisional Councillor has been doing a lot of consultation on this park, and I know that it's very near and dear to her heart. What we're being asked today is to consider 2 options in the report. Is it correct that if we choose option 1, that option 2 will be worked on and we'll look for co-funding so that the overall cost will hopefully be alleviated by either our state or federal counterparts in the costings in option 2?
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Yes, absolutely correct. We would continue. The first thing we need to do as far as the stage 2 plan goes is to go back out to the community and close that engagement with them through the Have Your Say site. And then thereafter it would be programmed to a future such time, and we would be seeking absolutely federal, state, any sort of grant funding that we can get that could bring on that project. And the intention would be that from a programming perspective, to plan to bring that on in alignment with then the beach entry pool's future end of life or its useful life.
Thanks. And I know that Councillor Murphy has raised the issue that this pool serves a dual purpose with one of her sporting clubs. Will this help alleviate some of their need in option 1?
The club that utilises the facility ultimately utilises the change rooms. The change rooms primarily were there to service the Eagleby Aquatic Centre. But as the Eagleby Aquatic Centre was a summer-only pool during the winter months, the Eagleby Giants would utilise the change rooms to service that. So yes, it would certainly continue to support them. I think in the long-term plan for stage 2 that the change rooms are planned to be there to provide that continued service for that club as well. And I'm happy to take any corrections, Councillor Murphy, if I haven't quite got that right.
Thanks. I love the way in which you've presented the report, you've costed it, and I really appreciate having that knowledge in front of me when I make a decision. Thank you.
Councillors, do I have any other questions before I go to the Mayor? I'm aware, Mr Mayor. Do I have any other questions? No. Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just realised the other question I was going to ask. With the installation of the new 50-metre pool in Bentley, Do we know how many extra staff we will have to put on and what the operational costs will be? Because I am aware that pools don't make money in the city, and that's expected. We're providing a service like libraries, but there will be obviously an need to increase obviously lifeguards and that sort of stuff. So what would be the operational, just a guesstimate of putting on that extra pool at Benleigh?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. At Beenleigh currently there is a 33-metre pool along with an indoor pool and a small play area. And then as part of the redevelopment of Beenleigh Pool, the 33 will be replaced by a 50-metre pool. So yes, there will be, through sheer size, materials, equipment and staff, there will be an increase in operating budget, albeit not a new pool though. So we would anticipate with the current operating expense difference between Beenleigh and Logan North, it would be a cost council with approximately an extra $200,000 per year to operate the Beenleigh pool facility. That does include the 50, the splash pad, or play area, my apologies, and the indoor pool.
Any final questions before I go to the area councillor? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll now hand over to the area councillor, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have made some notes here today and I just want to go through them. Mr. Mayor, you've asked some really relevant questions and I'd like to address them as well after I've just gone through my notes, if that's okay. This has been an extremely important matter within Division 12 and nobody ever wanted to have a work health place safety incident at Eagleby Pool, and that is the whole and sole reason that this pool was shut down. Community safety is vitally important, and I want to state that because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Thank you to the staff that have worked on this report and making it public today. So I just want to announce that out to the community that the last reports were confidential. Today the council officers have made this public so my community can hear what is happening. A lot of work has gone into this report and we've thought about right now and into the future. First and foremost is the safety of the community. So my community have provided feedback through community consultation on the Have Your Say. We've had outside consulting, visioning sessions. The council office went into the local shopping centres and took feedback as well. And we've received to date, to my knowledge, only one petition from the community. And from this, we have worked on two master plans. Two master plans being one for right now of the reopening of the beach entry pool and a vision for in the future so that we have got best bang for buck. So we've thought about right now and opening that pool up again to the public now, which will suit the Beenleigh pool because we'll have one shut and one back reopening, which will service the local schools. And they were the most amount of people that use these facilities, is the schools. So from those, we've got a long-term draft plan. Today, I'm asking my fellow councillors and the Mayor for your support to save the beach entry pool. I have set aside funding from the divisional LIP money, which is the local infrastructure, so I am not asking for any service enhancements. Yes, there's ongoing costs, but if this pool was already open and that workplace health accident hadn't happened, we would have still been paying those ongoing costs. So I'm asking for your support, and the funding for the future will be in the broader plan. As soon as this is passed, if it is passed, we are ready to start work, and I envisage that this will be open again for this coming season so our community can start, which is awesome timing because the Eagleby pool will be back open and the Beenleigh pool will start to be closed at the end of this season for the redevelopment. I now want the community also to get behind this. They say they want this facility, so please support it. I look forward to the vote. I thank you for your support and I hope that we can move on from this and get going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I still have a couple of questions. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. On this day, 15 years I've been elected. So I've been here for a while and sat through a number of these meetings, and for 15 years I can tell you that pool has been earmarked for closure. And I understand the work health and place incident triggered that, but it has been earmarked for closure for a very long time. And I just want to foreshadow with the manager, in the report it does refer to the CIS from memory and the needs within the city. Is there a need for another pool in this area, or a water play, or a whatever in the future? Is there a need?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bradley. The CIS, yes, is the Community Infrastructure Strategy, and within that strategy identifies, in this instance, the catchment size that pools service. So at the moment, based on the demographic of the southern planning sector, yes, this Community Infrastructure Strategy indicates that this area, and it's not just Eagleby, it's Beenleigh, it's all those surrounding areas, are in a surplus by one pool. So it's one pool more than what's sort of currently deemed needed to service a community of that size.
Thank you. And that was always my recollection as well over all the years. So I just want to ask, with the so the intention of option 1 is to keep the facility going as a beach pool sort of area, play area, for the life of that facility. Is that correct? What happens after that facility's end of life?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bradley. Yes, the intention is the stage 1 plan as presented in the report is basically an interim plan to repair that pool and have it operational till the end of its useful life. That will provide us some time to do the further work, and I think search for funding to support then the ultimate implementation of what the stage 2 plan presents.
And so basically its continuation is what the intention is. Is that correct?
What do you mean by continuation, sorry?
Because from memory, when we had this discussion a while ago, and it wasn't confidential, we supported Councillor Murphy to go out to her community because of the decision that was made. I did not think at that time the decision was made for further works.
As part of the option that came from that report, that included a requirement for council to come back with a report to this council, to explore the future uses of that park.
Future uses of the park, but not for future water play or anything like that.
I think in this instance, I'd certainly differentiate, in my opinion as an officer, differentiate between a water play, which is typically zero depth, requiring no lifeguards and significantly reduced operational costs, as a different sort of recreational play item, as opposed to certainly a pool facility requiring lifeguards, lap swimmers and that type of a thing. But yes, the stage 2 plan has been developed on all of the engagement and feedback that we got from the community.
Okay. I'm not sure if you can remember, because you've been around for a long time like myself, and in your previous role in parks, you would recall that there was such a facility earmarked for Underwood Park, and that got changed to Logan Central. So I'm just curious, there was work done previously about water play in the city. Has this been factored in at all?
This draft plan, no, has not been factored into the previous work that was done around water parks across the city.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bradley. I might just jump in with a couple of quick questions for myself. I do recognise that the Mayor and Councillor Raven have their hands up, and I know that the Area Council would like to close, and I'll give her that opportunity. There isn't two decisions to be made today. I think we're talking about option 1 and option 2. There's one option that's being put forward today, and that option is that Council delivers stage 1 plan as outlined in the report titled Bishop Street. Is that right, Ben?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And at this point in time, we recognise that the lap pool has closed and it won't be reopening. the decision today is whether we're going to continue with the beach entry pool to its end of life. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And my understanding is, other than the costs that were already explored by the Mayor, largely the cost has been covered by insurance or by the LIP budget associated with Division 12 budget. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Ben. I'll now hand over to Mayor Power.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it doesn't give me any pleasure to discuss this because obviously there is a large amount of residents that will won't like what they hear, and I understand that, but I have a job to do, and if there's any hard decisions to be made in this council, it needs to be made while I'm mayor, because that's what I'm here for, not to just tick off on everything. The reason why I'm quite emotional about this is because I was in a previous council and Councillor Bradley was there too. The discussion was, and it was accepted by the local council at the time, that we were going to close this facility in line with the Bentley pool coming online. The new pool was built, the 25-metre pool was built, and we decided at the time we would just extend it out because obviously the 50-metre pool hadn't arrived, and we thought, well, we might as well use it right up to the use by date. So being in that council, I accepted what was said to me, and I thought, that seems fair. All right. Now, I represent the city, and there's something like 65 or 64 suburbs with no aquatic facility at all. It's about being equitable in the city. There is a pool at Bethania. There is a 25-metre pool at Bentley. There's going to be a 50-metre pool at Bentley, and there's going to be a play area just like Logan North. That area is well and truly catered for, well and truly. There's going to be, when the 50-metre pool comes online, there's going to be extra costs. You've got operational costs here of around about $100,000. You've also got money required, and I understand the local council will facilitate that in a LIP funding, but it still ratepayers money. What you're doing by accepting the report here is kicking the can down the lane. The problem will be that you'll have this new facility at Bentley, and there's most probably going to be a lot more people going to that than this. This will become, there's no pool, it's just the beach area, and you'll have operating costs, and at some stage you're going to have to come back to this council and you're going to have to make the same decision again. You're kicking it down the line. You have to represent the whole of the city. Is this equitable that we have 3 aquatic centres in a very small area when you've got the rest of the city with no aquatic facilities? I don't accept this report. I understand that Councillor Murphy has got a job to do, and she's doing a very good job because you've got to remember she's also getting an environmental centre as well, which will have ongoing costs. Her electorate
Mr. Mayor, that environmental study is actually for the entire city and isn't directly relevant to Division 12. Could you please stay focused on the matter
I will
at hand?
stay focused, but I'm just saying that Division 12 has had more funding than I've seen for any other division. They're well and truly catered for, and I'm just saying that it should be more equitable, and Councillor Murphy's doing a great job. I don't think she'll get beaten in the next election by a long way, but I'm just saying we've got to be equitable to the rest of the city. You're going to have an ongoing issue. You'll be back here next year or the year after closing this pool. You've made a decision. You're going to go back on that decision, then you'll have to make that decision again. I say stay where you are now and just accept the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ben, can I just ask you, when is the, you're going to love this question, when is the 50-metre Bentley pool likely to come online for residents?
At this time, we're planning for it to be open in preparation for the 24-25 summer.
And when do you anticipate the end of life for the beach entry pool to occur?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair.
I know it's in the report, councillor. I read the report.
We have, yes, so theoretically, pools of this ilk have a 50-year lifespan. We're anticipating, based on that theoretical information, that it could have a 5 to 10 or up to 10 years useful life. However, that will be subject to general wear and tear, further conditions and assessments as we go. So theoretically it's 5 to 10 years, but it could be shorter or it could be longer depending on its actual performance.
Thank you, Ben. I have a question from Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a question as a comment. Thank you for bringing the report up, Ben. Very easy to read and answered all of my questions. I understand where the Mayor is coming from. 10 years is a long time to extend an asset's life for. That's a whole bunch of kids right now who are 8 years old who will get the use of that pool until they're 18. So they will use it for their entire youth by extending it for 10 years. That's a great outcome. If I could put a beach pool in my electorate for $115,000, I would do it tomorrow. Right? And to say that you want to spend money to wind it up rather than spend a little bit of money to extend it for a decade, I agree. If it was a year or two, Mr. Mayor, I'd be with you. I'd be saying that's too much for a very short period of time, but a decade is a long time. And you're right, not everywhere has this many facilities, but the city doesn't have an even spread of facilities at all. Like the Councillor Murphy's area has 30-something sports and community facilities. I have 3, and that is a burden on her for the Division 12 local infrastructure budget. But it's also a great benefit because people come from all over the city to enjoy the facility, including my electors, who come from all over the city to enjoy what Beenleigh has to offer. So I'm very happy to support it because I just had a call the other day from a resident who is unhappy about the number of people using the Bethania pool and wanted to know and that's a Waterford West resident, saying that if at least the Eagleby pool was open again, I could go somewhere else when the kids were all using the Bethania pool. So people are happy to drive and people are happy to get there and use it. So I'm very supportive of the local councillor. I think, again, any of us for $115,000 worth of LIP would be chomping at the bit to be able to put a pool back into our electorates to do that. We wouldn't even think twice about it. So I think the councillor has made a good decision, and my only problem is, and Councillor Bradley and the Mayor alluded to it, is that we had a decision earlier that didn't have all the information. We didn't know if there was going to be insurance money available. That decision should never have come before council because there wasn't enough information to make a fully formed decision. And I said that at the time.
Councillor Raven, there were reasons at that time which we can't disclose in this room because they were divulged during confidential, but we did have our back against the wall and that report did need to come to council.
I get it, but it was still a decision that we were being asked to make, not fully informed, and now there's new information, Madam Chair, which is why it's coming back again. Because you're right, normally we wouldn't relitigate an issue we'd decided so recently. But when you get new information, you go back and you reassess. That's good decision making. I just wanted to lend my support to the divisional councillors' intent. I think it's a great idea and you'd be absolutely crazy not to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. I have Councillor Wilcox. Do I have any other questions before I go to Councillor Wilcox? I'll just note that down. No, great. Thank you, Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Raven and Councillor Murphy. We're getting another 5 to 10 years. Like, it is $115,000. I applaud Councillor Murphy for asking for this report to come back. We were both sitting in the room and we both wanted to keep the beach entry pool open. The beach entry pool, yes, it's a beach entry pool. You can still swim laps in that pool. There's only a couple of lanes, but you can still swim laps. It's very similar to the Coomera Aquatic Centre. We just don't have a library there, but it has a beach entry pool and you can get in and swim laps. You can still do that. And yes, if the school program swimming is at Bethania, you know, the public can go to Eagleby. I would like to say, and I agree with Councillor Murphy, I would really like to ask, the community are the ones that are fighting for this, as well as Councillor Murphy and some of the councillors in here, to have this pool brought back online. They need to get out there and support it. If this gets supported today, the community need to support the recommendations as it's endorsed, and they need to get in there and they need to use the pool. Councillor Murphy has 2 master plans, one for now, as she said, and one in the future. This isn't so that the beach entry pool can be there forever, but it's so that she can have one master plan for now and then continue master planning for the next stage of its life. I fully support Councillor Murphy in this. I'm happy to second the motion in support of Councillor Murphy when this comes up. Yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Thank you. Did I have a question on my left? I just wasn't sure whether Councillor Bradley had her hand up or not.
Yeah, I'm happy to move reception of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I'll be putting the report up as it stands in the first instance. If that fails, I'll come back to the reception of the report. I have a question from Councillor Bannon.
Thank you, through the chair. The mayor has good points, and so does Councillor Murphy and Councillor Raven. What I'm worried about, the first stage one's a bit of a no-brainer, but it just opens the door to stage two. So that's where the mayor's points come in. Like when it come down to spending another 6 or 7 million in Beenleigh for another pool, that's when I'd have an issue. I know that's a future budget discussion, which I'd go against, because they've got, like you said, one too many. This one I don't think's that hard. Opens it up, kids can use it straight away. But as soon as we approve this just pushes the stage two through, which is another fight. Well, I'm asking them. I know what we're voting.
Excuse me, councillors. I'll enable Councillor Bannon to finish his point, and then I'll ask Ben to respond accordingly.
I'm well aware of what we're voting on. What I'm saying is stage one, and we're already talking about stage two. If we approve stage one and the beach thing opens, all that's doing is down the track, we're going to knock on the door for stage two and in a budget $6 or $7 million for another pool. That's the part that concerns me. Like, can you do stage one, or is that just a stage two? It's up to us in the budget to fight over that money.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bannon, and it's a good clarification to be sought. This report is only seeking endorsement of stage one. The stage two is in response to the council resolution from July last year, and it's an update on what that stage two plan looks like on the back of that feedback. We're not asking council to endorse stage two at this time. We need to go back out to the community and share with them that vision and understand from them if we've captured the vision from the feedback that they've said. And then, yes, going forwards, when the beach entry pool, if council were to decide today to reinstate the beach entry pool, then a future council will need to determine that stage two plan when the beach entry pool comes to its end of life.
So if your stage one doesn't get up, stage two's dead? Or is that how it works?
That would be a matter for council at the moment. If stage one, my opinion as an officer, if stage one were not to be supported, and obviously stage two were not to be supported, then the likely scenario, in my opinion, will be that we are removing, filling and making good both pool areas to green space. And then that space, the embellishment of that space, would be a further conversation around local infrastructure programming funding and certainly from support from our Parks branch.
It's a hard one because stage one's no brainer, but I just know we'll sit in a budget argument over $6 or $7 million, which shouldn't be going there. But I don't know, it's a hard one.
Just for clarity, for my sake, Ben, if councillors support the recommendation today, they're not locking in any commitment to stage two at this point in time. Is that right?
That's correct, Madam Chair. The stage two plan is in this report because it was a requirement of the options selected by council in the July report from 2022. And then the stage one plan is before you in response to the council resolution from November. The proposed recommendation from officers today seeking council support for the reinstatement of the beach entry pool for the $115,000 that it will cost to do that. It is not asking council to endorse the stage two plan.
Thanks, Ben. I've got Councillor Russell, and then I'm going to close this out with the area councillor. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben, with the insurance, like the insurance money that we're pretending doesn't exist here, but with okay, if we were to go ahead with this today, and then 5 or 10 years down the track, well, okay, first question is what happens to that insurance money should we not go ahead with this today?
Excellent question, Councillor Russell. So I'm informed from our broker that if council were to decide not to proceed with repairing the beach entry pool, which then would lend itself to a further conversation If not that, then what? And then for the purpose of answering a question, I'll assume that means knock in, demolish, remove the 2 pools, backfill, make good the site into green space. Then yes, identified in the report is the estimated return from our insurance would be the same regardless of the option. The reason being is the insurance doesn't cover the making good of the pool, but it does cover the repairable costs of the pool. Because we're building the Beanley pool in preparation for the 24-25 summer, we're building a like asset in a similar catchment that will service similar people, and those insurance costs would be reimbursable as then those costs were expended on that project.
Thank you.
And so that is an option, as opposed to if we were to, as per this report, repair the beach entry pool, then we would get those costs reimbursed as we do the works and produce invoices. And then the difference is if we don't repair the pools, we will still get the value of the repairable costs because it is the lesser than the indemnified value of the pool. And those costs would come to us as we build the Beanley pool and replace a like asset for that southern planning sector.
So just to clarify, if we didn't go ahead with this today, that money would fill in the pool and turn it into green space, and then anything left over could go to the Beanley pool? No.
No, that money, no, my apologies. The money wouldn't necessarily, technically, the insurance doesn't cover the filling in of the pool.
Okay.
We would be, because we are building a like asset in the same catchment, we have access to the cost to repair, regardless of whether we repair it or not, only because we are replacing this asset, it would be argued, with a similar asset, i.e. the Beanley pool, in a similar catchment.
Okay, all right, thanks. So follow-up question then was that if we are to go ahead with this today, and then 5 to 10 years down the track, when we make this decision again, and should we then decide not to make the pool usable for longer, what then pays for the filling in and turning it into green space 5 or 10 years down the track? Like,
Good question. So the filling in, and as detailed in this report, there is a line item, I think, in there to decommission program and pool and beach entries pool. So there's an allowance in that stage 2 plan costing that would cover that in a future such time.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hall's got a quick question.
Not so much a question, but a statement. For you, the Chair, the Bavania pool's actually taking the brunt of this pool closing down, meaning that the usual clientele that would use this facility is now going to the Bavania pool. And it's actually making it harder for my local residents to go to the pool that is in their local area. There's nothing worse than being turned away or having too many people in the pool at one time. It might mean to say that
Councillor Hall, can I just ask, are residents getting turned away?
I don't think they are, but I think you'll find that, when there's too many kids in the pool at one time, parents will say, just wait a bit, there's big kids in the pool. Yeah. Hang on. There you go. If there's too many children in there, we won't let certain adults inside the pool. Yeah. So yeah, certainly I have heard that it has been difficult at the Bavania pool. Now, there's not too many times when council and the local councillor align in terms of what they would like for their community, and this is one of the cases where they do. So usually, I'm usually 100% in support of what the mayor would like, because I believe he has a very good vision and he has the overall view of the city. But in this certain situation, I believe the councillor understands the needs of her community and her area better than what any of us else could. And therefore, I'm aligning my support behind Councillor Murphy in this decision of, reinvigorating that pool and getting it back out to the community. Because, You can't afford to put that type of asset in any area for the cost that this will happen. You know, even putting a car park for one of my dog parks is pretty much more expensive than this. Thank you.
Councillor Bradley, please make this brief.
I'm just wondering if the officers could clarify, has the Bethania pool been more busy as a result? Is the stats up? Like what percentage, for example? Because that's always been a low usage pool.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, through the chair. The visitation data doesn't show that to be the fact. However, some peak periods have had similar reports to what Councillor Raven and Councillor Hall have suggested, where there has been, you know, pretty close to capacity, and with current sort of industry challenges around lifeguards and so forth, it has put a little bit of pressure on certain peak times. Overall, we haven't seen it collectively. We were hoping for a little bit more re-engagement, I guess, or rebookings of some of the school visits to relocate. But it appears as if some of them may have chosen alternative situations in the short term. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a little bit of increase, but nothing dramatic, nothing, probably more, you know, utilisation of the facility.
Yeah, utilisation in peak periods certainly added some extra pressure. And again, both being summer pools, that's the peak time for both. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm now going to close out the debate with Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to go last. Councillors and Mr Mayor, I have taken this report really seriously and the planning of this report. I have not only looked at the now and the cost involved to council from a whole of council perspective, and Councillor Raven hit it on the head when he said that this is only $115,000 to repair. If I go out to my community today and say we're not opening the pool because it's going to cost $115,000, there will be anarchy for sure. It does have 2 draft plans. I've tried to think about the future and now. So right now, for the $115,000 that it's going to cost to keep this pool open for 5 to 10 years, it is worthwhile, especially while we're upgrading the Beanley pool. I have 10 schools in and around the area. 4 of the schools used to use this. That's 6,000 visits to this Eagleby pool just in a season. I've also started the second draft plan because I felt that it was value for money to do it at the same time, rather than in 10 years' time when this pool will be coming to its end of its life, we start again. So we've started the visioning, we've had the community consultations, we've had the have your say. This is what my community is telling me they want. It is not a second pool, it is a water play park. If this pool gets decommissioned in 10 years' time, then we look at a water play park. That's what the community asked for. There will be no staff at a water play park. I've tried to take all the information and put it together and be mindful of everything. Right now, our budget is, everybody's doing it tough. So for the second stage plan, we've tried to look at it for further down the track when we may have those fundings available. Plus, by that time, we should have more growth within the city as well. And by that time, we won't be one pool over. We'll probably be needing a pool. So I've tried to be mindful of everybody and have that greater picture. I've looked at the now and the future. It is over to you guys now. I hope that you can support me. I understand if you vote your certain way, but I thank you for your time today. I thank the council officers for what they have done. This has been a really difficult consultation and putting the report together. It has taken many, many hours of work to get to where we have got today. There's been lots of complexities, from work cover claims to insurance to decommissioning to electrical power lines to all sorts of issues that we've had to look at this, and I'm very proud of the work that we have done here. So I want to say thank you regardless of the outcome today. So thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to pass the report, please.
Thank you, Councillor. And can I just commend all the councillors here on the maturity that you've brought to the table in debating this particular issue. It's a challenging one. I have great sympathy for the area councillor. It's very difficult. I also respect the Mayor's position. He's looking at the whole of City and is trying to provide downward pressure on rates and so on moving into our next budget period. So this is not an easy decision and it will have repercussions whichever way we go. But thank you for your genuine attempt at unravelling this issue for the best outcome for the city. Councillor Murphy has put the motion forward. The motion is on the board behind me. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. By show of hands, can I see those who are in favour of the motion? Up high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. That motion is carried. Can I please have a show of hands those who didn't support the motion? Mr Mayor, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Bradley, how do you vote?
Abstain, thank
Abstain.
you.
Do I have any other hands up? I did. Sorry, Councillor Heremiah, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Thank you. I'll just check that the minute clerks have all of that. Excellent. Thank you, councillors. And again, thank you for your attention. That was a tough one. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the newly appointed Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager's report. Mr O'Brien, do you have any general business for the councillors?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one item today, please. It's a bit of a good news story. Kingston Butter Factory has been nominated as a finalist for the Accessible Venue of the Year award. So just wanted to a bit of a shout out to everyone that's been involved in planning, designing, building that project and also operating it right now. So Council's application showcased our venue's accessibility not only from the perspective of disability access for artists and patrons who are neuro and physically diverse, but also accessibility for emerging artists, economic accessibility, cultural and community accessibility, linguistic accessibility. So I think it's a really great acknowledgement just being a finalist in the Queensland Music Awards, and I think that'll be held later in March, and hopefully, fingers crossed, watch this space. Thank you.
It's a brilliant venue. Thanks for sharing the news, Ben. Councillors, do we have any general business for the manager? I've got Councillor Lane, followed by Councillor Raven.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, through you. Ben, I just want to give a big shout out to your team. The EOIs are open for the Old Amputee and Family Support Group at the Seniors Centre and Ryan's Place. And a number of groups from across the city have expressed an interest in those facilities. They want to come into Division 2 and in some cases replicate services, which I don't like. But I'm really appreciative of your team in talking those groups through and recognising that they have a vision for what they can do for the city, and hopefully when the EOIs close and your team works through that, that will get a great outcome for the community. So thanks very much to your team for working on that.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Ben, on Friday evening you received a call from me after I received a number of calls from a hire at Metro, and I know Metro isn't your responsibility anymore because it's being managed by Basketball Queensland, but I just want to commend you and Carrie for the amazing work that you did to respond after hours to something that was causing intense distress to the good people from the Crystal Classics dance sport event. And when I went there the next day, she was beside herself. She gave me a big hug and asked me to pass it on to you. Just pretend that we did that. But she couldn't have been more grateful, even just remembering how happy and relieved she was. She was in tears when she was talking to me. So great work. That is literally what People First looks like. You didn't have to do it. It was totally above and beyond the call of duty. And I was just so impressed, and it makes me really proud to be a councillor in this city when we've got that sort of service coming out of our staff. Thank you.
That's great feedback. Thank you, Councillor Raven. Do any other councillors have any general business for the manager? No, there being one. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on. Councillors, I now draw your attention to item 5.2. 5.2 is the Disability Action Plan for 2023, I beg your pardon, to 2025. And through the Director of Community and Lifestyle, Mr Brad White, I'd like to invite our Acting Community Services Manager, Ms Michelle Griffin, to deliver her report. And she'll be with us in just a moment, everyone. Take 5. Good morning, Michelle. Good morning, Sarah. Take your time when you're ready.
Thank you. Through the chair, I am presenting this morning our final copy of the Disability Action Plan, which has now been out for public consultation from December until the 5th of February. We received 31 submissions through the community and all of those responses have been acknowledged. So the report presents to you our very final copy. The only additions has been, there's 2 actions which you'll see in the report. That's been based on councillor feedback and community feedback. We've also just amended it to be a little bit more consistent with council's template. So we've changed the aim statement to be at the top of the document, and we've also amended all the branch names based on some of the new foundations work. The copies from here, what we will do is if it's endorsed, we would take the opportunity to launch the strategy, and we will invite you all to attend a launch. We will also be promoting it on social media. We'll send you through a CEO update so you've got all of that information to promote to the community. And if you're hearing of anyone who would like alternative formats, so in Braille or larger font, please let us know, and we're really happy to get those delivered to residents or to anyone that you may know who wants them in a different format. I just want to take the opportunity to thank my staff. I can't take any credit for it. Alex Beresnay has mainly put all of this together and delivered it, so I just want to thank them for all of their hard work, and for every branch across council, because I get to sit here and take the credit for everyone, but there are multiple branches, as you will see, who have got actions in here to make it happen. Thank you. Happy to
Thank you, Michelle. I've got a question from Councillor Bradley, followed by Councillor Lane.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just curious if you've had this brought up before. I tried to find it in the report and couldn't, so please let me know if I'm incorrect. In relation to like sporting facilities and people with disabilities getting access to fields, has anyone raised that, like pathways, walkways, to actually, help in leased areas? Has that been raised before?
Through the chair, we haven't had that come through specifically from the community since my involvement, but we have looked at, so there's been audits undertaken on all of council's facilities in the past.
Yeah.
I suppose the audit was to mainly look at whether we meet compliance, and we do with all of council's facilities. But if there is a need to look at making them more accessible, if there's particular kind of areas or sporting fields, then I know that the right areas of council are more than happy to look at that. And we can take that offline if there's specific ones that you may know about.
Well, there's at least 2 that have been raised.
Yeah, definitely.
Facilities.
Yep. Yeah.
But it's within lease areas.
Yep, that's fine. We can catch up offline, and I can get the details from you to look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much to you, Madam Chair. Michelle, thanks to your team for bringing forward this report. I do have a few questions on it. Does the report actually force council to deliver disability compliant facilities throughout the city?
Do you mean if this strategy forces that?
New ones.
It doesn't necessarily force it, but it highly encourages us to look at going above and beyond and investigating what we can do. So KBF is a good example of that. There's obviously the minimum standard requirements, and the work that we do and with Ben's team, so currently Sport, Leisure and Facilities, is to look at how we can go above and beyond when we are building new facilities. So it encourages that. It's not forcing it, but it's encouraging.
Thanks very much. The reason why I asked that question is we're currently retrofitting footpaths in Division 2. People with disabilities in chairs and in mobility scooters aren't able to negotiate hard right-hand turns, particularly on main pedestrian areas. And new footpaths have been built, and I've actually had to ring up and ask why weren't they made with curves on the corners, on the hard right corners. And it's because it's not a requirement of council, I believe. So if this report actually pushed that way we don't have to retrofit in the future, that would be absolutely amazing. The second thing is there's a number of facilities that Division 2 local infrastructure budget has encouraged or actually requested that ambulant toilets be made in current facilities. Pulling full DDA compliance in our buildings would cost an absolute fortune, but as we improve them, we do comply with those requirements. But the emergence of need for ambulant toilets when disability toilets are busy is quite high, particularly in my division. So I'm just wondering whether or not this again pushes that thing where if we're doing small infrastructure without moving walls, whether we can consider that as part of the general maintenance budget rather than the local infrastructure fund catching up on some of these requirements.
Through the chair, yes, we can, and this is why we have the plan to make sure, and why every branch pretty much is involved in it because of the importance of it. And yes is the answer, and we can definitely look at it, and I'll talk to Ben and his team as well. In regards to the footpaths and curbs, I know we've spoken offline about that as well, and that is why there's been an action that has been added into the plan, so we can investigate that more.
Thanks very much. Sorry, Madam Chair, but just one last one. In the Parks branch, so we have one Liberty swing in the whole of 4114, and I'm not sure, I think Beenleigh has one. I'm not sure, I think Jim Boomba has one as well, or the equivalent of a disability accessible swing. We've actually tried to, as part of that, make some of our parks more disability friendly, but we have this situation where the Australian safety standards prevent us from doing certain things. So a good example is buying a carousel for a park. Putting that down into the ground actually makes it so that a person in a wheelchair could actually get onto that carousel and swing around with their friends, but we don't have the capacity to do that for some reason. I'm just wondering whether that could be looked at as part of any future considerations for disability accessibility in the city. It makes it so that we keep bang for buck in buying things for our local parks without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on one swing. But it just enables kids to be able to play with their siblings in a park.
Thank you. I will add all of those and talk to the relevant branches. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Lane, for your constructive feedback. It's appreciated. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Councillor Lane sort of went down the avenue that I was hoping to go down as well, because yes, I've got an older building that, whilst it is compliant 30 years ago, it wouldn't be compliant if it was built now. I would welcome it if we could get funding so that in the maintenance funding, we could build toilets and that sort of thing, so we're not solely and wholly trying to find ways of how to get these built-in compliant buildings from 30 or 40 years ago. So I'd welcome that conversation as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillors. Are there any other questions? Councillors, you'll have a motion that's about to pop up on the board behind me, that the report titled Disability Action Plan 23 to 25 be endorsed for public release. Could I have someone to move the motion? Thank you, Councillor Lane. Seconded by Councillor Bradley. By a show of hands, can I see your support or otherwise? Thank you, Councillors. That's been unanimously supported. Now, Councillors, I'm going to ask for any general business for the Acting Manager, but before we do, I would just like to acknowledge Alex, who's unable to be with us today. This was actually her last report that's coming to committee because she's leaving us to further her other career opportunities, but she was the author of that report and many like it. And I believe Alex is watching from home today. She was unwell, so she was unable to provide her own report, so please give her a wave. I'd just like to acknowledge Alex's 15 years of service in community development, and she's in fact delivered 2 disability action plans to council, I believe now. Not to mention that she's supported the delivery of multiple community development initiatives across the city, and I know many of you will be familiar with the Logan Youth Action Group, which is a big favourite among councillors, the Walk and Talk for Wellness initiative, Kindness Rocks, a favourite of mine, and Chatty Cafe. Alex has provided guidance to council staff and external stakeholders to support the community through 15 years with council, and she's provided human social recovery support throughout the pandemic and the floods. So she was actually one of those folk who rolled her sleeves up and got hands-on and involved. She also has provided support to the mental health sector, more specifically men's health across Logan. And as a Division 4 councillor, she's been absolutely instrumental in delivering some tremendous initiatives in the Yarra-Bilba area and the Division 4 region. And I know she'll be sorely missed by me and many of you, and of course she's a great loss to the team. So Alex, I just wanted to acknowledge your contribution and thank you for your commitment to council and to wish you well in future endeavours. I might ask if the manager has any general business for councillors.
I do have one good news story. I just wanted to let everyone know Swim Logan, which everyone's really aware of. It was a federally funded program which has now concluded. It concluded in December, but you'll receive a CEO update this Friday with all of the amazing achievements, and it was a 2-year project. I'm going to read some statistics that Elise has given me. There's 1,979 newly arrived migrants and refugees and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who attended the program, delivered 95 water safety awareness programs, 54 swimming lessons. We now have 9 teachers through the Swim Logan program who participated and 4 First Nations people who are now lifeguards at our Aqua Logan. So yeah, really incredible outcomes from it and lots of sustainability, and Zarin is going to be on the cover, one of the participants of the next Our Logan, so you can read her story. So we will send you more information and we will attach the whole background report and a bit of an overview so you can see how great it was. Thank you.
Absolutely a great program, Michelle, and love it. Councillors, I'll now open the floor to general business and we'll kick off with Councillor Lane.
Michelle, I want to say a big thank you to your team. Elm Park Community Garden was started between Access Community Services and the Parliamentary Health Network, and it ran its course. It was a thing where migrants could put their hands in the soil and build gardens and do whatever it was that they were doing there, building friendships. We've been working on expanding that garden and opening up to the public, and I want to thank your team who were at the meeting earlier this year, where we actually got community stakeholders interested in coming on board and being a part of that future community garden. We spoke about accessibility, we spoke about seniors accessing it, migrants continuing to access it, and actually having play groups come in there. So there was a lot of ideas thrown around, but the team from the community garden section just rock. Like, they're absolutely amazing, and I'm looking forward to when we get some resolution so that the park plans can move forward. But I just want to say a big thank you to the team for that meeting. It was absolutely magic, so thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lane. Do we have any other general business for the Acting Manager? No, there being none. Thank you, girls. I'll let you get back to work. Councillors, I now draw your attention to item 5.3. Item 5.3 is the Animal Management Plan for 2023. And through the Director for Community and Lifestyle, Mr. Brad White, we will invite our City Standards and Animal Care Manager, Miss Emily Shafto, there she is, there's Emily, and Emily will be joined by Michelle Burridge today to present her report. Take your time, ladies.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Through the Chair, good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Today, we are delighted to present to the City Lifestyle Committee a report, this is the wrong report, endorsement of the Animal Management Plan, the 3-year action plan for the City of Logan. So our city is home to a large and growing number of pets. Pet ownership is something we celebrate rightly in the city and support because it brings so many benefits to the community. So while they bring us joy and companionship, they also come with a set of serious responsibilities and obligations. So following the conclusion last year of Council's 4-year animal care strategy from 2018 to 2022. This new 3-year action plan recognises the importance of pets in our lives, but also really emphasises the need for responsible ownership. So through the key pillars of prevention, education and enforcement, it aims to really focus on the challenges that arrive in the public sphere from pet ownership, such as overpopulation, backyard breeding, nuisance behaviours, and most importantly, for Logan, risks to public safety. So this is a 3-year point-in-time action plan, which sits separate to the future operations of the Animal Management Centre, which is currently undergoing renewal and redevelopment. Shaped by extensive councillor and community consultation, this plan aims to deliver initiatives which protect both people and animals and create a safer and healthier community for everyone. So we are really excited to see the positive impact that it will have and look forward to working together with councillors and the community to create a great environment for pets and people.
Thanks very much, Emily. Do we have any questions from any councillors? just like to make a comment. The report reads very well and the action plan is great, but how awesome are the photographs in that report? I was very taken by all the cats and all the dogs in there and all their loving owners, and there's even, I think, a rooster in there, isn't there? So, the images are tremendous. But back to the content of the report, we have a question from Councillor Hall and Councillor Lane.
Not so much a question, but a statement of support. Part of my election promises was to make my community safer and make sure that my residents, are safer. And I believe that this does exactly that. It is really not punishing anyone who's doing the right thing with their pets. What this is actually doing is giving council some of the rigours and the power that it needs to enforce against people who are doing the wrong thing. And you've probably heard, when worse circumstances, when something happens with animals in our communities and the devastating impact it has on our communities when that happens, this will help prevent those things from happening. This will help give council the powers that it needs to prevent that from ever happening, and I think that's very important, and I highly endorse this. Thank you.
And Councillor Hall, can I just thank you too for your advocacy in this space? I know as Deputy Chair that you've been quite passionate about the work that's been conducted by the animal management team, and thank you for your interest in that and your endorsement of the report. I'll now pass over to Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much to you, Madam Chair. Ladies, I would just like to say I really enjoyed reading the report. I enjoyed visiting the Animal Management Centre, and what I most enjoy is your enthusiasm for animal management and community safety. We've got after hours numbers where people can ring if dogs are roaming the streets or if they feel there's an aggressive dog out there, and officers will come out and react to that very quickly. A lot of the public don't know about that, so the promotion of that is a great thing. We have had problems with roosters. It's great when you buy little chickens and you're planning on having chickens laying eggs, and all of a sudden the rooster starts strutting around, and at all hours of the day you get cock-a-doodle-doo. You react very quickly to that, and I very much appreciate it. We've also had the issue of goats. So you're sound asleep and all of a sudden there's a bleating sound and you think you're in a T-Rex movie, Jurassic Park or something. Animal management is so much more than dogs and cats. It's about the safety and welfare of animals, and I know that when I've reported issues in my community and concerns from residents, you're very reactive to it. This report actually just solidifies that, and I'm very supportive of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks very much, Councillor. Any other questions from any other councillors? Could I have someone to move the report? Now, the report is to be adopted, and that's been moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Bradley. By show of hands, can I see all those who are in favour of the report? Fantastic. That has been unanimously supported. Thanks for the great work, Michelle. It's excellent work. Thanks, everyone. Okay, councillors. I now draw your attention to item 5.4, which is, here we go. It's a review of subordinate local law 9.2, and we're looking at election signs today, and Emily is being joined by Sherry. Now, I understand Emily has a PowerPoint presentation that we would like to table first up. So could I have someone to move that the PowerPoint presentation is tabled in relation to 5.4 of the City Lifestyle Committee held on the 15th of March 2023, that be tabled? Thank you so much, Councillor Wilcox. Could I have someone to second that, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Stemp, and by a show of hands, I noticed a couple of councillors have left the room. Show of hands, that has been unanimously supported, noting Councillor Murphy has just left the room for a moment. Excellent, councillors. With that being said, we'll now move into the body of the report, and Emily, I'll invite you to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Through the Chair, today we present to the City Lifestyle Committee a report on proposed minor amendments to election signs. So election signs play a critical role in communicating the messages of political candidates during election periods. As you are aware, Council currently regulates election signs on a limited basis under its Local Law Number 9 licensing and subordinate Local Law 9.2 election signs, and has done for some time. These laws aim to uphold the safety and amenity of the city during these times. So since December 2020, Council have been deliberating whether and to what extent election signs should be regulated under local laws. Following briefings and workshops, in September 2022, Council resolved to make minor amendments to the local laws to introduce timeframes around the display of signage and to provide also clarity around the definition of what is an election sign. So since that time, the branch has worked closely with expert constitutional and government lawyers to prepare draft amendments. So where we are now, after having determined in September to amend the local law and the extent to which to amend it, we're now in the position of presenting the specific options for reform and asking councillors to make a decision today to enable these amendments to proceed for community consultation and state interest checks. So before we discuss the amendments, I'd like to observe that efforts to reform election signs must strike a delicate balance between protecting any right to freedom of political communication and addressing also legitimate concerns about safety and amenity. So like any policy matter which relates to rights, liberties and obligations, there remains in this room a wide range of views about whether and to what extent election signs should be regulated. We acknowledge that there is and will never be one single view on the matter. So likewise, across Australia, there is no one uniform standard of regulation which applies to election signs. There are, in fact, endless ways that Council could seek to define and amend its local law. So, respecting the ability for councillors today to freely select the best way forward, we have brought to what we believe are legally viable options to Council today, rather than one fixed option. These options aim to balance the implied freedom of political communication as well as safety and amenity objectives. So in doing so, we hope to minimise any confusion or lack of clarity, introduce greater clarity and secure a decision to enable any local law reform to be achieved by the end of the year. So the first proposed amendment is fairly simple. In line with Council's resolution of last September, it proposes to restrict the display of election signs to a period of 60 days prior to a local government election, or in the case of a state or federal election, the date on which the writ or public notice notifying polling day is the election is issued, and then for signs to be removed within 7 days following the polling date. So, any questions at this stage from councillors?
Thank you. No, thank you, Emily.
Okay, I will proceed. The second proposed amendment, this aims to provide greater clarity around the definition of election signs. This is the amendment that comes with two options. So, for context, there are potentially uncertainties with the current definition of election sign under the current law as it exists, which potentially creates challenges for candidates and also council staff alike. So currently we'd observe that there's a little bit of uncertainty about whether an election sign is political material like brochures, how to vote card signs or posters with photographs of politicians, whether it's political material of any type displayed on private property but not visible to the public, and whether or not it covers signs on vehicles and trailers. So as we've discussed for some time, there is latitude in how widely council can define an election sign. However, we must be really mindful that the definition of the broader the definition of an election sign, the greater the risk that the law infringes on freedom of political communication, and that creates risks for us legally in terms of potential challenge. So moving forward, we propose two legally viable options for council to consider today, which aim to provide greater clarity. We'd acknowledge that there's probably a number of ways we could cut this, but this is us coming back with two options. So the first option is a broad and all-encompassing definition of election signs. So it includes signs which are clearly election signs, such as Vote 1 with a photograph of a politician and the name of the electorate. But it also proposes to include any sign that has information which could influence a voter or affect the results of an election. So some examples we share on the screen. These show signs which could be regarded as signage which could influence a voter at an election, or have potentially colours of any variety which are associated with a political party. So it's signage essentially that could broadly influence a voter at any time. So to avoid any doubt, it includes election signs on vehicles. We have included this definition, and it's a definition that certain other jurisdictions, other local government areas use as well, but not all. But we've included it because it reflects the definition of election sign under the Electoral Act. What it means is that this type of signage can be displayed during an election period, but at any other time it becomes unlawful to do so without a licence. So for clarity, we're proposing that it's not a number of things. So nothing in the proposed local law will affect anybody's ability to communicate about political matters as you see on the right-hand side, in newspapers and online, in clothing, in paraphernalia. That's simply not the role of local government when it is regulating safety and amenity in public areas. So that's the first option, and I'll move
Emily,
to
could I just interject there? I have a question from Councillor Lane. Councillor Lane, would you like to ask that question now before we move on to option 2?
I would. In option 1, is this just during an election period? Because we've got Say No to DV, we've got a number of advocacy strategies that are used in the community which do impact election outcomes. Your rights at work, there are a large number of waiving that goes on in the community, and it's mostly for the good of the community. So I'm just curious as to whether or not this covers that, because that option 2 to me is it's refusing their right to do that. So
thank you for that question, Councillor Lane. It's the more restrictive of the two options, and it comes with greater legal risk. Yes, it would indeed mean that signs that potentially could influence a voter, and it'd have to be taken on a case-by-case basis depending on the content of the sign. But if it fits within the definition as it appears up here, then potentially yes, it would be classified as an election sign and regular, and it would be as long as the signage is displayed during an election period, it would be entitled to be displayed, but at any other time a licence would be required, or it would be unlawful.
So in effect, it's up to the officer and their opinion as to whether or not it constitutes a matter that would sway someone's opinion in an election. So a good example is your rights at work.
It's a great question, and this is probably something that every local government around Australia grapples with, is that it's not a perfect science. There's no perfect formula. An officer, having regard to this definition, would have to consider all of the factors, within the definition, and then make a judgment call, I'd imagine.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Councillor Lane. Yes, I agree. There's some challenges associated with this. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Emily, just to clarify, so if we did choose option 1, all the nice signs that we see on school fences that state and federal MPs have are in the colours of political parties, so they'd effectively be illegal under this measure?
And it depends on the sign and it depends on the content, but if the sign that is, as you described...
It says their name and their electorate, and it says their contact details, and it's in a political colour. So
I'd hazard a guess that yes, that is the case. Yep.
So the other risk I can see is that you're going to spend a lot of time with candidates going, well, the LNP blue is this RGB code, and I'm 2 shades of blue off that RGB code, therefore that is not a political colour. I think a lot of resources will go into arguments about what is and isn't both in and out of election periods. But anyway.
It's a great observation, and I think whatever definition that we give to election signs, it will never be perfect. It will never be perfect, and there is always potential for that to be challenged. So this is just our branch coming back with 2 options that we think get closer to Council's objective of making the definition of election sign clearer.
Thanks, Emily, and a good pick up, Councillor Raven. It's challenging. If there's no further questions, I'll invite Emily to present the second option. Okay, no further questions. On to option 2.
Thank you. So the second option defines election sign more narrowly. So this is the less restrictive approach, if you like. So it just restricts an election sign in definition to being a sign which clearly shows a candidate and or political party at a current election. So it's a typical call fruit sign we see at elections with a photo of a candidate and which election and division they're running for. We also propose to include these types of signs on vehicles. So what this means is that this type of signage can be displayed during an election period. However, at any other time it becomes unlawful to do so without a licence. So to avoid any doubt, it is not a sign which is generally political in nature. With this definition, that type of signage would not be regulated by this or any local law. So again, it proposes to not include a range of things to put beyond doubt any of those aspects. So any questions on that?
Thanks, Emily. I've got a few. We're going to kick off with Councillor Lane, followed by Councillor Stemp and Councillor Heremiah.
Thanks very much. Just to play the devil's advocate on this one. So we have real estate agents who 365 days a year have signs everywhere with their face on it, and then they run for council and use the exact same photograph. That's election signage for 365 days of the year. I'm just putting that option out there as can be used. An election sign must be authorised by the AEC. So obviously someone who uses the same photo from their election, their real estate signage would actually be in breach of the AEC guidelines as well, because they haven't declared as a candidate 3 years before. It's an interesting scenario, and I appreciate what you're trying to do. I really do. I think with election signage, Brisbane City Council limits the number of signs, and they're up. We know they're up for a month before an election or 6 weeks before an election, and then they're taken down. Every sign is registered. It just makes a lot of sense to me. This is something completely different. I appreciate where you're going, but I can just see ways that people are going to wiggle around this, and yeah, it's not always pretty.
Thank you for that observation, Councillor Lane. I think it's fair to say there will always be situations in which the law cannot be rigorously applied. It is one of the most difficult local laws I think we have, because of the inherent implied freedom of political communication, and it is illegitimate for council to regulate that in so far as a direction that stifles that. So we have to be very careful when we introduce laws of this nature.
No, I agree. And we're debating about election signage when you guys are actually flogging yourselves trying to remove all of the commercial signage that pops up on public infrastructure around the community and causes absolute eyesores 365 days of the year. So we're in here debating about election signage, and I appreciate you're busy with the other stuff, particularly in my community. The painters and the roofers have all decided that they're just going to put up hundreds of signs throughout the community, and it's just, yeah, it's not okay. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, thank you, Councillor. I'll move on to Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. My question was just regarding the proposal 1, the election period. I just want to understand, it says no licence is required to display an election sign before, during or after election if the sign complies with the exemption criteria under the subordinate local law. So does that mean someone can apply for a licence to display outside of that period, and what would the cost be for that as a matter of interest?
That's our advice, yes.
Yeah.
It's in practice very infrequent.
Okay.
The cost, I believe, is in the realm of about $370, I think, from recollection, although I'd have to...
So that would be per sign?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Just curious to see what that was.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Stemp. Next question, Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question regarding the previous slide.
Which one?
It was the one with, option 2, this one. So this is a different, more narrow definition of an election sign. But I still have a question about that word publicises, because it says that an election sign means a temporary device that publicises a candidate and or political party at a current election. I want to understand, would that still affect those school signs that were mentioned previously? Because if a school sign says federal member for a specific electorate and provides essential contact information that the community really values right outside their school and exceeds 1.1 square metres, would that be classified as an election sign under this definition?
Thank you for that question. No, that would not be classified as an election sign for the purposes of this definition. It is a sign which has no connection with an election, other than to promote the fact that there is a politician who is elected to that electorate. so, no.
So even though the sign publicises a candidate, despite them being a sitting member of Parliament, it's not an election sign, despite the definition saying that an election sign means a temporary device that publicises a candidate?
It's in relation to an election. So if the sign, in my mind, just sort of says vote 1 candidate such and such federal election, that is an election sign. If it's just a general, under this definition, a general sign with a photograph of a politician and representing electorate ABC, it's our view that that is, under this definition, not an election sign.
Okay, thank you.
And it aims to put that beyond doubt, because there is at the moment quite a level of greyness in whether, and what constitutes an election sign. So this option squarely aims to be very clear that it is not a sign which is generally political in nature.
Thank you for that. And you've mentioned it previously about greyness, and my concern is even this narrow definition still has a great deal of greyness involved, and that's what happens when you try to regulate freedom of expression, because reading those words, even though your intent is different, I'm concerned that many legitimate roles that an elected member conducts themselves would be considered electioneering under that definition, when in reality it's not. It's actually just fulfilling your role as an elected member. But thank you for the answer.
Thank you, Councillor Herramiah. I've got a question from Councillor Hall.
Leading on from Councillor Herramiah, so essentially what you're telling me, with my 30 or so trailers, if I was to take off the words vote 1 from those trailers and just had Councillor Tony Hall representing Division 6, it's not classified as an election sign.
That is correct.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Thanks for the clarity, Emily. Emily, have you still got further slides? Yeah, thank you.
I'll continue if I may. Thank you, Councillor Kransky. So I guess the key differences between the two, option 1, the broader definition, is in fact more restrictive regulation towards signage. So in capturing all of the general political signage that of any nature that could influence an elector in relation to an election, that's captured under that. So option 2 proposes a less restrictive regulation towards signage, in which the local law controls signs which publicise a candidate or political party for an upcoming election specifically. So the first option, in our view, carries, and this is based on the advice we've received, bears a greater risk of legal challenge because it is more restrictive, and option 2 bears less risk of legal challenge because it is less restrictive in nature. So I guess moving forward, it really comes down to the extent to which Council wants to regulate signage, which has political style messaging. But following the decision today, Council will undertake community consultation and state interest checks with a view to finalising these amendments by the end of the year, bearing in mind that it's been quite a journey to get to this point. Community consultation will be broad, and it will be available for everyone to be able to share their feedback before any legal amendment takes place. So it will take place over the coming months and involve a survey on the Have Your Say platform, and there will be some social media inviting comment. We're really at the point now, I think, where we'd like to invite councillors to consider the proposed resolutions before them and make a decision in relation to each of those resolutions.
Thank you for the presentation, Emily. I've got a question from Councillor Lane.
It's not so much a question. Can we go back one slide, if that's okay?
We're nearly there.
No, back one more, sorry. So the interesting part about option 1 is it actually talks about political parties, and in the local government area of Logan, we don't have political parties. We actually have independents. So let's say a Stop the Stink sign or something like that is actually a mantra from a particular candidate that actually allows for political movement in terms of how they actually interact with the public. It's known as a slogan, and I really appreciate the work that you guys put into this report. I really do. I just can't support the report. I like that candidates will be able to put up election signs, that they will be able to, you know, go out there and put forward their ideas. I'd prefer that they were actually on houses that were designated and given permission to put those signs on, that there's a structure around the election signs as to where they can be. But this just isn't, I don't think it, for me personally, as an independent councillor who is a member of the Australian Labor Party, running against independent people in the community, I think that this unfairly brands things, and it's, you know, we're full of independent people, so yeah. I don't want to see us actually going after political parties instead of every candidate that can come up.
If I can just jump in for a second there, I think Councillor Lane, you're dead right. This is a really challenging environment, this one. I'd just like to bring councillors all back to why we're here and what this was all about. And there was a request from councillors for officers to provide a report and to provide us with alternatives. And I thank those councillors that took the time to be part of the workshops. I know a number of you asked questions offline. I thank you for those councillors that asked those questions online. This is a step towards a form of regulation, which is what councillors had asked for. The decision is ultimately in your hands today. Effectively what we'll be doing is we'll be putting up the recommendations in a moment, and of those recommendations you'll notice the officer's recommendation, which I'll just put in front of me, gives effect to proposal 1 and then asks for your consideration on whether you would support option 1 or option 2. If you don't support either one of those options, then we'll actually be looking to bring this matter to a close, and we'll be looking at the existing local law continuing in its current format. So that's how we'll be progressing through these options in just a moment. If you've got any questions, now's the time. I note that I've got a question from Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine's just a statement, I guess. So just give me a sec, just have to unlock my phone because it turned itself off. Okay, so I'm a strong believer in this being implemented, but I'd like to outline why. So if you look around during election periods, it could appear to be a free-for-all in Logan. Like, really, there's signs everywhere. It, anything goes somewhat. So I believe election signs are visual pollution, and depending on the amount of candidates, it could be a bigger or small problem. In my case, there were 7 candidates in my division. I mean, 7 lots of signs in 7 different clumps in who knows how many locations within Division 7 and Division 8 and Division 11. Because people did a bit of overlap, so it just looked terrible. And then when you take into account other divisions too, that, and Mayors especially, they were the worst, weren't they? So yes, there were many clumps of signs, and it just made the place look terrible. So what I believe is that we need an election sign definition, probably the narrow definition actually, because that'll sort of take away a lot of the concerns that we've got. And we need a time frame when they can be put out to ensure we know what can and cannot be enforced. So another thing is too that anecdotally, when driving around Brisbane or the Gold Coast, there were not any noticeable election signs on council land whatsoever that I could see in any of the election periods that have been around. And if other local government associations can legally do things, why can't we do a more fairer version, which is what I think that we are trying to get through right now. And another thing is election signs are one of many facets in an election campaign. It's not the be-all and end-all. In my opinion, is if candidates do not have the skills to door knock, to engage with residents in meetings and to do minor public speaking, they will really struggle if they are elected. And during campaigns, there are many opportunities to hone one's skills in all the items that I listed before. So yeah, it sounds like people are and aren't against this. I'm not sure, but I'd be open to extend a display period to 90 days if we had to. That might make people a bit more comfortable with this. Is that possible though at all, to extend it a bit? Can I ask that question?
Emily, have you got any thoughts on that?
Thank you for that question. We, I think, did deliberate that last year, and councillors may choose whatever direction to proceed in. But I do acknowledge there's not likely to be agreement in the room. Councillors last year appeared to generally settle on the view that 2 months or 60 days was about right. And that's why we've come back with a proposal for 60 days. We feel we've looked at other jurisdictions as well. Some are more restrictive, some are sort of 30 days, some are 60 days. We feel that 60 days is a reasonably generous period already.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, we can change it, I guess, so that's good. So in sum, I believe we really need to ensure our city's visual amenity is maintained, and these proposed changes will go a long way in making this a reality. So, thank you.
So may I ask a question of you, Councillor Fraser? In a moment, we're going to put this toward the vote. Are you keen to move the recommendation, which I'll ask to pop up onto the board behind me if you can, just so you can have a good look at it, with the preferred option being option 2 of the proposal? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Correct.
Thank you, councillors. I just want a starting point. So if you can please familiarise yourselves with that motion. I will make sure everybody gets an opportunity to speak, but we will be working through this in a structured format. Okay. Now I've got you there, Councillor Wilcox. I've got Councillor Jeremiah next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's really good to get some order in terms of the motions that will be moved, and I have been reading over option 2 and 1 to get my head around it, and in terms of this regulation, I think option 2 is the least worst option. And the reason why I say it's the least worst option is because there's a lot of different statements in this regulation that concerns me when it comes to making sure that political communication is free and equitable. And not only those big concepts like equity and being free to speak your mind in a democracy, but also small things in these options. Things like on page 85 of your overall agenda, it states that a motor vehicle election sign means an election sign displayed on a vehicle, including a bicycle. So according to this regulation, a bicycle is a motor vehicle. And that doesn't sound right. That sounds silly. And I think that when it comes to political communication, we should make sure that our regulations are good. There's been statements saying that this is a step towards a form of regulation, and I'd just like to double check. Do we have a local law right now that governs election signs?
Yes, we do have a local law.
Thank you.
Subordinate Local Law 9.2. The definition of election sign is contained within the Local Law number 9 as well. The challenge is that there is a lot of uncertainty at the moment that potentially does impact on political candidates, politicians, and also enforcement staff. You know, with the risk of a council overstretching in terms of its regulations. So option 2 proposes a less restrictive approach to provide real clarity to the extent possible around what is and isn't an election sign. It will never be perfect. No wording that you could assemble could ever put every single situation beyond doubt, but we feel that it gets closer to that objective by ruling in and ruling out certain things.
Thank you for that. So it's a step towards a different form of regulation. We have regulation right now. This is a step towards changing that regulation.
It's a step towards greater clarity, which is what councillors asked for in September last year.
And with these new regulations, would they limit election signs on private property, or is this just about public property?
No, there's no change to regulation of election signs on private property, and in neither of these options propose to restrict election signs on private property to any extent.
So this wouldn't apply to someone's house having a sign that's visible from a public road?
So the election signs local law currently does regulate election signs on private property, but this does not propose to increase the regulation of election signs on private property.
Okay. With page 5 of the report, it states that council has a legal obligation to consider freedom of expression when it comes to different policies that we take. And that page states that we're going to look over human rights, that we have an obligation to consider, but we'll consider it after we endorse the new regulations. Is that accurate?
So just to be clear, it will take place once council has made a decision today on which way it intends to proceed, which is either the more restrictive approach or the less restrictive approach. From there, a human rights assessment will then be undertaken, state interest checks undertaken, community consultation undertaken. We can't do all of those things just yet until we've got a policy direction from council.
Okay, and page 4 before that states that these new regulations are based on some local laws in Moreton Bay Regional Council. What were the lessons learned from the Moreton Bay Regional Council's election sign local law?
Thank you for the question. Moreton Bay to my knowledge, introduced a quite very prescriptive regime for election signs, a much more prescriptive approach than we see here. I can't talk to the experiences of Moreton Bay, but the guidance that this proposal takes from the Moreton Bay model is around ruling out what are not election signs. So we thought that was really helpful to articulate what are not election signs. So they're not clothing, they're not brochures, they're not how to vote cards. That doesn't currently exist in the local law as it stands, and there's potential risk there for everybody. So we took that guidance from Moreton Bay's local law.
Well, that's good, and it definitely shows that there's a risk when it comes to election sign laws and lawsuits. There was a mention before about Brisbane City Council and some of the election sign laws they have there, and I'd like to quote from a Guardian article published in April of last year that says that, quote, "The Greens vow to defy Brisbane Council order to remove election signs." Now, what happened there is in these inner city seats, you had the Greens political party allegedly putting up hundreds, if not thousands, of signs in their area. If you went to Brisbane in April or May last year, you would see it very clearly, a lot of signs about a lot of different political issues. And then the community looked at that, and when you look at the election results, the Greens won 3 new federal seats. So I think this whole debate about the community's concerned about amenity, it's true, but they would show that concern through election results. I know many candidates that went and put up signs everywhere, so many signs, and they didn't get voted in, because Councillor Fraser is right when it comes to elections. It's more than just the amount of signs. You need multiple different platforms. You need to engage, you need to talk to people. And the community is pretty smart when it comes to elections, and they can see through someone who is abusing or taking people for granted when it comes to putting up too many signs. Now, they can show that very clearly, and it's through a vote. So I think that when it comes to regulation, it needs to be focused on making sure that people have an opportunity to put their hand up as a candidate and making sure that it's an equitable base. We mentioned real estate agents before, and under some of these changes, a real estate agent could have trucks and trailers and billboards saying that I'm XY, your local real estate agent. They can build name recognition that contributes to the election campaign while not having the same scrutiny as other professions such as teachers. I would love to see different people from different backgrounds in council, and what you do when you introduce very strict regulations is that you provide a benefit for certain occupations that can use funding that isn't governed by regulation to benefit them in the elections as not an election expense or not an election sign. So I think that option 2 is the least worst option. I think that this whole reform was worthwhile investigating. I think it's not perfect, and when it comes to freedom of political expression and the constitutional risk and the legal challenges that could come up, we need to make sure it's perfect. This isn't perfect, so I don't think it should be adopted or passed today. So I'll be voting against it, but I still think that option 2 is the best of the worst. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Herrimer. I appreciate how you articulated your point. Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, through the chair. I was actually triggered a little bit. This isn't a question. This is going to be a statement. So get your Tony's about to say something. Hat's ready. I was triggered a little bit by Councillor Fraser, and there's really only 3 things that trigger me, and that is safety, environment, and political freedoms, or freedom outright. And if you step on any of those, I am instantly triggered straight away. Now, Councillor Fraser used the description free-for-all in regards to election signage. It is a free-for-all, and that free-for-all is called democracy. That free-for-all is called freedom, freedom of expression, freedom to put your hand up. It's visual pollution, yes. Visual pollution, but visual pollution for a reason. The same way you see at protests signs. They are also visual pollution, but it is an important part of democracy and freedom because that visual pollution carries a message that gives people hope, a message that lets people aspire that we can go on to do better things. Now, if you've ever listened to the stories of a parent who has grown up in a communist country run by a dictator, you would understand the reasons of why we need visual pollution.
Point of order, Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall, I'll caution you. Now, I'd just like to point out that you began the batting with criticism of Councillor Fraser's presentation of his point of view. I think that you're going down a path that's causing offence among your councillors, and I'd ask that you curb your enthusiasm and make your point with perhaps not such strong language.
Thank you through the chair. I will comply. We were not elected to make it hard for people to run against us. We were elected to be the voice of the people that voted for us. So that means we were elected to vote on local government matters, not political matters, not matters regarding democracy or freedom. I respect these council officers. They're great council officers. They do very great work. They're very good policy writers. But I do not believe this particular item is ratepayer money well spent because I do not believe these are the types of policies that we were elected to create. I believe that any person that runs against me deserves the same rights and freedoms that I had while running to run against me. And that's my closing comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall, and I think we can hear your passion in that. I would just remind you and all councillors here that the officers are only acting under our guidance in the first instance, and they're providing a report back to council as we, as a collective, requested of them today. Nonetheless, I take on board your point, but they are only doing as asked. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. I was going to say the same thing. The council officers have brought this back because we voted in November that we would vote, that we supported it and it would come back. So that's why this is here. So we need to make a decision today. Just noting the key difference on one of the option 1 and option 2. Option 2 had a vote 1 on the top. With the option 1, did it mean that there was no vote 1 on those posters?
Through the chair, thank you for that question. Yes, it does. We do not regulate the content of an election sign, but typically the option 1 broad definition, it would include situations of vote 1, a typical sort of election sign, but it would also include signs that have a politician, a message, political colours that are general in nature. So it's both. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. That's what I was just going to double check, because if it's got a name, a division, no division, a council, a slogan endorsed by a photo, vote 1, no vote 1.
Yeah.
If it looks like an election sign, it is an election sign.
Unfortunately, the complexity of this is that it's case by case, and it's very difficult to sort of sit here and give definitive answers because it really very much depends on the sign that's presented at the time.
Lovely. And I was just going to say, my ratepayers hate the visual pollution, and I was lucky enough that I didn't have 7 people running in my last campaign, so we weren't littered with it, and there was only 3 of us, and I'm in a major rural area and that sort of thing, and people were still quite upset with the amount of signs and that sort of thing that were out. With the general political signs on schools, I know this was sort of being talked about and that sort of thing. It doesn't have an endorsement on the bottom. So is that still classed as a general political sign, or is that because it doesn't have it doesn't have an endorsement on the bottom? Is it classed as general? Is it not classed as general?
Thank you. Great question. This option 1 proposes to regulate signs where they contain information that could influence a voter in relation to an election. So it would depend on the content of the sign, but if it's got a politician, you know, and a slogan, fighting hard for the future, a brighter future, or something like that, say it's got the colours of a party, or otherwise, if it in any way could influence or affect the result of an election, this option proposes to have it fit within the definition of election sign, yes.
All right, no worries. We asked for this to come back. The community has asked for the visual amenity and that sort of thing for 60 days. I'm happy to support option 2. If Councillor Fraser has moved it, I'm happy to second option 2. I don't have school signs, and I probably won't have school signs because my schools don't like it. It is the school that actually says whether or not you can have those signs up and that sort of thing. So I'm more than happy to support option 2 so that those councillors that do have school signs out there can continue to have those school signs. But we voted to bring this back. We need to make a decision, and I'm happy to support option 2. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. I'll come back to that motion in due course, but I want to give the opportunity for Councillor Bannon, Councillor Raven and Councillor Bradley to speak. Councillor Bannon. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll put you down here at the bottom. We'll get to you in due course. Thank you, Councillor Bannon.
Thank you, through the Chair. Councillor Wilcox pretty much said the same stuff that I'm thinking. The only people that think the signs are super important are usually the people putting the signs up. The community hate them. So I know everyone loves the freedom and that, but the community can't stand the things. And I feel for the staff, you can't get this perfect. It's like waste. Doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to get it right. So you did a great job. I'm happy with Nat. I reckon we push on. We could be here for days.
Thank you, and I take that on board, Councillor Bannon. I'll keep moving. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And at the outset, I'd like to thank the staff for their great work on this. It is impossible to achieve consensus. So, and you've acknowledged that, but I just want to say that you've done great work and you've done it because we asked you to look at it. And that came off the back of feedback that we heard from the community after the last council election, and then the state election after that, and then the federal election after that, that there was too many signs and they were impacting safety and amenity. So it's in response to community concern that we brought this up. So I feel it's a good use of ratepayer resources to investigate it and see how we could regulate it better. To go to the options, I can't support option 1 because a great example is the Deputy Mayor's marquee. It's got a name on it. You can't use that in option 1 anymore. That's how broad it is because it's got your name, says your division, it's got your colours, can't use it. So that's too restrictive, and I think we're all on the same page there. Option 2 is good because it narrows it right down. It creates some loopholes that Councillor Hall pointed out. And my concern, though, is that there's really 3 things that we're thinking about here when we're making this decision. One is freedom of expression, and we've all touched on that. I personally don't think you should limit someone's freedom of political expression on their own property. And I don't think the complaints come from people having signs on fences. The complaints come when you have 9, 10, 15 signs on a verge, which is public land, right next to a road, very distracting, often not very well maintained because it's hard to get there safely and there's so many of them. And neither of these options goes to restricting the installation of sign sites on public land. And I'll share some feedback that I got from people who run political campaigns, so that's state and federal campaign directors and managers who could not believe how easy it was to put signs in Logan because you just whack them on the footpath. You don't even need to talk to people. You can just put them out, which means there's no obligation to either build a relationship with the voter or to convince someone that your cause, whatever it may be, is so worth supporting that you're willing to put a placard on your fence to stand up for it and support it. And my concern with this is it doesn't address that in any way, shape or form, does it? We're still going to be able to have them on the footpath, essentially.
Depending on which option council chooses, we do regulate election signs in some way. So we've got the existing local law that has existing regulation that has requirements that relate to safety on roads and amenity.
But if they're not too close to a roundabout or a major intersection, they're on a straight, they'll be able to go on the verge still.
As long as they comply with the existing exemption criteria. Yeah.
And so my concern is that it doesn't actually go to addressing that safety and amenity factor, which is what the community asked us to look into. So while yes, we're adding some additional clarity, which is good, it's not going to the point where it's actually going to significantly improve safety and amenity. That comes under the enforcement that we do, which I know will come later. And the other factor, there's another factor we didn't have that we didn't realise would come into play when we started this process, Madam Chair, and that was the expenditure caps. So the expenditure caps are in draft legislation right now. They're going to kick in before the next election. Last election, you could spend $5,000 on your election campaign, you could spend $50,000 on your election campaign, and that meant that candidates essentially had unlimited resources to just throw at election signs and put as many up as they wanted, because it didn't matter if they got torn down, it didn't matter if they got graffitied, you just replaced them. The only thing that limited you was the amount of money that you had in your pocket or that you could get donated.
Councillor Raven, I actually hear what you're saying, but it still is draft legislation. It hasn't come through yet. So
the intention is to have it delivered just like they did with other legislation just prior to with the public reporting of
I hear what you're saying,
right?
but in terms of our officers, we can't ask them to
Oh, no,
speculate.
no.
So
I completely
they
get
can
it.
only make their decision on their recommendations based on the information that's currently known to them.
I agree with you, Madam Chair, and I'm not expecting them to preempt that. But when we started this process as council, we didn't know that would come. And so we asked for all this work to be done. But right now, two levers are going to be pulled at once if we approve these changes. One lever will be the expenditure caps, and the other lever will be whatever changes we decide to vote on today. And they may together make a difference. They may not make any difference, but if they do make a difference, we won't know which one did it. Because it could just be that candidates have less money to spend and therefore put out less signs, and you improve the visual amenity that way. But it could be that candidates will have a limit on what they can spend on election signs in the next election. Very likely. Still draft, as the Chair said, but very likely that you will have a limit of how many signs you can put out purely because you have a limit of how much money you can spend. And this is very likely to mean you see less signs because candidates are going to have to make tough decisions about where they spend their money, and you won't be able to afford 1,000 signs because that's like 5 to 10 grand on its own.
Unless perhaps you already have them in the garage. Have you
That's
got
true.
a question there, Councillor?
It doesn't always work that way. Yeah, it's not always that simple. But I take your point, Madam Chair. My point is that there is changes coming that could well achieve the outcome the community wants, which is the improvement of amenity. This doesn't go to that, in my opinion. So I won't be supporting either option because we will set an expectation that we're going to see an improvement and we'll be held accountable by our voters to why didn't you do something that actually made a difference? Because if it's just as bad as it always was...
So, Councillor Raven, if this doesn't get up today, I'll probably be looking for a motion from a councillor to continue with the existing local law with no change.
Receive, yeah.
Thank you.
Just to receive.
Okay. Any question for Emily in there, Councillor?
No, I asked my question, she answered it very well.
Emily, did you have any comment you wanted to make in relation to that? No. Okay, moving on. Thank you. Now, Councillor Bradley's very kindly given her place up in the queue to Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just tell you with experience, I've been here for a long time, as you know, and I have gone through the process of having heavy regulated signage local laws, and can I just say it was a very effective process. It gave everyone the opportunity to be on a fair ground, I could say, that everyone was regulated, the amount of signs you could put up, and they had to be licensed, they had to be in front of people's homes, and can I say that the visual pollution that was there was obviously, now I can understand why people complain about it, but I feel very uncomfortable about voting on something like this. It reminds me when we used to vote for our own pay rise some years ago, and obviously I felt very uncomfortable about this as I do this, because obviously you can't help but reflect on your own personal situation, and then you start to reflect on what is the better cause. And the better cause obviously is to get the best candidate in the city. Not yourself, but the best candidate in the city. If you happen to be the best candidate, that's a good thing. But that's what we should be designing these to be. The unfortunate thing is if you have an open plethora of signage, the incumbent has a huge advantage because they just basically each sign covers each sign and no one recognises signs. And I'll give you an example of that. In the last mayoral election, we had a candidate that actually came third. She did know how to vote cards. She did no signage. She did absolutely nothing. And she came third. And she beat some of the high-profile candidates. One was the Chamber of Commerce president, etc., etc. She did nothing, and she still come third. I would actually like to do this social experiment of actually running for mayor and not having how to vote cards or not having election signs, just to prove that theory. So we're probably debating over a lot of things that is irrelevant and over important, because I think we're underselling the residents' intelligence. But what I will say is that we should making it fair for everyone. So if you just have this open and accountable, let's just do whatever we want, the signage, yes, it'll be seen to be favouring the incumbent, because not everyone just, like you say, there might be 4 or 5 mayoral candidates, there might be 4 or 5 divisional candidates. It just all blends into one. In fact, most people don't know whether they're running for mayor or council, because some people forget to put what they're running for on their signs. It just becomes an absolute visual pollution, I would call it. And I would like to see, obviously, some regulation put into this. I understand that political parties have a huge advantage because they have a lot of supporters and they have a lot of people who will put their signs straight up outside their homes, and a huge advantage. I support the best candidate, not whether they're in a political party or whether they're independent or whatever. The best candidate should win. So how do we design this so the best candidate wins? Well, I could obviously argue for both sides of the options here. I think, you know, I'm going to have trouble voting on one of these, because I feel that really we should be thinking about the resident, not ourselves, and thinking about the best candidate.
Absolutely, Mr Mayor. I think we're all here with that view, that we're representing the resident, and any one of us may not be here in future, so
I'm just saying, no, I could vote for both. Honestly, that's right. And I'll leave it at that, because I find it very uncomfortable to vote on it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to close out the debate with Councillor Bradley, and then we're going to move on with Councillor Fraser's motion. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. I'm so glad the Mayor brought up about Sherry Heath. I think a female mayoral candidate will probably win next election. I'm predicting that. But just...
Thanks for your endorsement, Lisa.
Are you running again?
I'm assuming you mean once the Mayor ultimately retires, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Bradley, please continue.
Sorry, I got distracted. I forgot what I was going to say now. Yeah, I can't support either, but I want to ask Emily, please, if I may, in relation to political signs that are on sporting facilities, would the option 1 trigger those?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bradley, through the chair. It really depends on the content of the sign. It's very difficult to sort of give you a definitive answer, but a sign, option 1 is intended to be broad and capture any sign that has any information that could influence a voter in relation to an upcoming election. So it's hard to say without sort of understanding what the specific content of the sign is, because it's a judgment call on a case-by-case basis, but it is broad. So if such a sign can affect the result of an election or have any influence on any elector, then I'd say it would be an election sign under this broad definition, which, as I said, carries increased legal risk.
Okay, and the other question I have is I've noticed like a trend towards no colours, just a face, and know how, you know, vote 1, and maybe a location, but that's it. Would that be triggered by either of these options?
The challenge with trying to regulate signage in general, specifically election signage, is that it is case by case, and there will never be a perfect definition. All I could observe is that if it's publicising a candidate and or political party, and there's an upcoming election, we would treat it under option 2 as an election sign. If it's visibly vote one candidate, if it's more general in nature and just has a photo of a politician, regardless of the colours and a slogan, we'd probably seriously consider it under the option 1, and it wouldn't fit within that narrow definition under option 2. So it is imperfect. I'm not sitting here defending the, we could come up with 10 different new options and we'd probably not get it right. So we're just, it's very case by case.
And can I just say too, I've noticed also real estate signs using specific colours as well.
There is, I will just jump in there if I may. With real estate signs, and I know it was raised today, there is a separate regulatory regime as it relates to real estate signs. And if real estate agents or whoever's displaying real estate signs are doing so in contravention of that local law, for example, by displaying the signs for longer than is necessary or promoting a business, that could cause them to fall foul of that local law. So I know there's been some discussion about sort of those signs being potentially election signs, but there is already an enforcement mechanism in place to deal with that.
I hear you, but I have noticed this trend as well. That
no doubt, no doubt. I think council there are a range of ways that politicians will seek to have their voice heard. It is a democracy, but I will remind councillors that council regulates election signs for safety and amenity only, and that's really the only way in which we can bring these options back to you today.
Yep, thank you. And just to, I will not be supporting either option. Personally, I do not feel it goes far enough. That's just my opinion.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. It was just that last statement that council regulates it for community safety. If that were the case, we would be removing signs from the side of the road. And I believe the state actually has a local law that, a state law that says that signs must be so many metres off a state road. So in the consideration of this, we've focused too much on the actual sign and what it looks like and the definition of it, rather than achieving an outcome of either A, a reduction of signs, B, the safety of signs, or C, where those signs can be located on public land. So I think I looked at the old minutes, and the first motion that came up on local laws on this thing didn't pass. The second one didn't pass. The third motion actually passed. So we actually went through 3 different motions to get this report, to get the request for it, and in each of those occasions I actually opposed that for the very specific purpose that we were concentrating on the look and feel of a sign rather than the actual community safety. So I want to thank you for your report. I know a lot of work went into this and I really do appreciate it. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry you have copped an hour full of it. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, now we're going to move on to the vote. I have a motion on the floor which has been moved by Councillor Fraser. It's been seconded by Councillor Wilcox, and that motion is up on the board. Could you please take a moment to read the motion and make sure you understand the motion before we vote? Okay, councillors, Councillor Fraser has moved, Councillor Wilcox is seconded. Can I see a show of hands, those who support the motion? Let's count that out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That motion has lost. Okay, councillors, the alternate motion was proposal 1. I've just lost it off there, sorry. We went with option 2, didn't we? So it's option 1. Let me just get it up on the board here. With option 1, do I have anyone who wants to move that motion? Sorry, I'm not sure what's up behind me. I'm just trying to have a look. Sorry, before we move on, the team would just like to know how you voted on the last vote. So, Mr Mayor, how did you vote? Councillor Bradley?
Strongly against.
Councillor Lane?
Against.
Councillor Russell?
Against.
Councillor?
Partially against.
Partially against. Councillor Hall?
Mildly against.
Fraser?
For.
Jeremiah?
Against.
Bannon?
Against.
And 4. My apologies, everyone. Everyone, what I want to do now is actually just to test the floor. My understanding from the debate was that councillors didn't particularly have a appetite to support option 1, but nonetheless, I wanted to call to see if anybody wanted to move option 1. All right, just one moment. I'll just pass over to Emily for a moment, and then we'll come back to you, councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky, for your indulgence here. I've just been brought to my attention there could be another option if councillors are not supportive of making a change to the definition of local law. There could be just a simple amendment around the election period only if councillors are more comfortable with supporting that aspect. So that's the 60 days plus 7-day removal. So that's an option. That could be a standalone option for this particular report. I just wanted to note that right now.
Okay, all right, we've got to keep moving. I've got a motion that's live at the moment that's been supported by Councillor Wilcox. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Okay. We have a seconder with Mayor Power. Can I see by a show of hands those who are in support? Okay, that is only Councillor Wilcox and Councillor Power. Everyone, oh, sorry, Councillor Fraser, didn't see you down the end there. Councillor Fraser. Can I see by show of hands those who are against? Just so I'm clear. Everyone else is against, so that motion has failed. Councillor Murphy, did you want to put up an alternate?
Yes, please. Can we just look at the first proposal of the election period and just pass that part of this report and leave the 2 further options with regards to definition of an election sign off? Can we do that just with the timing phrase? Although Councillor Raven is waving madly and probably would like to add to this.
I'm just going to allow the officers a moment to consider that, and I'll go to Councillor Raven.
Just a quick question, Madam Chair. Thank you for your indulgence. So on the 60 days before period, I'm mindful that this will impact state and federal elections as well, and federal elections aren't a set period. So that means that they will be unfairly disadvantaged because the Prime Minister can call an election whenever the Prime Minister feels like it after 2.5 years. Is that right?
Thank you for the question. Just to clarify, so for local government elections, it's a 60-day period because there is no writ or notice. But for a state or federal election, a non-fixed term election, the period starts from the date of the writ or notice. So it is variable and it's not, there's no fixed days there. Yeah.
It's not fair, but I promised I wouldn't debate. I just wanted to ask the question.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Fraser who wanted to respond first.
Oh, can I just make a statement quickly? So we've gone through this process. It's taken for ages. Some change is better than no change. I'd love to see it go really hard like Brisbane or Gold Coast, seriously, but I understand that we have found a middle ground that during our workshop, we came to this. So having some change, that's my opinion anyway. So it was going to be a close vote, I knew that, but some change is better than no change as far as I'm concerned, so I'll be continuing to vote for small amounts of change if that is what has to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fraser. I hear you. Okay, have we got that motion up behind me yet? Thank you. And Councillor Murphy, I'd ask that you read that and ensure that you're comfortable with that.
Emily, can you just look over this as well, because this is what you were proposing before? Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'd like to indulge that we're doing this from a resident's eyes, not from a political eyes. That's how I see this. I agree with Councillor Fraser that we need to look at it from our community's point of view and take the politicalness out of it. So.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Okay, the amendment is that Council resolved to commence the process to amend Local Law 9 and Subordinate Local Law 9.2 to give effect to Proposal 1 of this report, and that Council undertakes community consultation and state interest checks under the Local Government Act in relation to the legislative instruments prepared under Recommendation 1. Are you satisfied with that wording, Emily? And Cherie,
Through
welcome.
the chair, yes, and thank you, Cherie, for joining the table. Yes, I am satisfied with that.
Councillors, I note that the City Solicitor has entered the discussions. Emily, could you please, in a nutshell, advise councillors of what this means?
Certainly. So currently, the current local law places no timing restrictions around how long election signs can be displayed for, and that, particularly after elections, can cause issues with the signs being collected. And we do receive complaints from the public that signs aren't cleaned up quickly enough after an election. So this amendment, based on Council's resolution back in September last year, it responds to that. So it proposes for a local government election, which is a fixed term election, there be a 60-day period in which people can display election signs before the election date, and then they have to remove the signs within 7 days of the election date. For a non-fixed term election, touching on Councillor Raven's point, the period starts from the day of the writ or notice for the election, and again concludes 7 days following the polling date.
Thank you, Emily. And can I just clarify that this will effectively be an amendment to the existing local law, is that right?
That is correct. A very simple amendment.
Excellent, thank you. I think we all understand. Do I have a mover for that? Just a moment, thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Lane, I'm sorry, I thought that was your question, Councillor Lane, that's why I asked it.
No, I'm definitely not. With all due respect to the City Solicitor, I don't like motions on the run, and I certainly don't like it that we've proposed to extend the actual time frame of signs being up in the community to 60 days. I think that's just, it's over the top. So rather than actually agree to this motion rather than agree to this motion as it is on the run, I'd rather us carefully consider the timeframes that are needed and not be excessive. Everyone spoke who voted for options, talked about the amenity of the community, and now we're looking at voting on something that doubles the time frame for election signs out in the community. It's 60 days. That's
Emily, could you please comment?
This is why motions.
If I may, and of course Council has discretion in allocating timeframes to the display of signage, but I will observe that last September councillors gave us the clear direction to impose a timeframe of 2 months, being 60 days before an election, and a clear direction for 7 days following an election. So that was why we've come back with this proposal and this timeframe. Of course councillors can choose to change that, but in our view it's not a change on the run. It meets the requirements under the September 2022 resolution.
Any further questions, Councillor Lane?
Yeah, so the way in which the vote went last year, it did pass, you're absolutely correct, but it wasn't an overwhelming pass, and the people that actually voted for options today are the ones that supported that ideal. So if we're talking about community amenity, then we're actually looking at reducing the overall impact on the residents rather than putting it out to 60 days. That's just a comment, but that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley, have you got a question?
Yeah, I'm with Councillor Lane on this. I probably would prefer it when the election is called, and that is a blanket, but obviously it's not what's up there.
Emily, are there any restrictions currently under the local law?
Through the chair, no, there's no timing restrictions whatsoever on signs.
So this would be a step in that direction?
This would be a step in that direction, and it's something that councillors expressed to us very strongly from the moment that we had our workshop in April 2022, that there'd be consideration given to this. So we've done that, and we've come back with this proposal today.
That's my recollection also. Now, I've got Councillor Hall, Councillor Herrmeyer, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, I just propose that we have it so that after the election, the signs need to be down within 7 days. I think that's pretty fair. Doesn't disrupt anything else, but it basically gets rid of that visual pollution or the visual amenity without changing the aesthetic of actually running a campaign.
Thanks, Councillor Hall, for your thoughts. Councillor Herrmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question about this motion regarding that, I believe, the 60-day rule that we're discussing? Is that 60 days for fixed term elections like local government elections and state government elections?
Thank you for that question. It's 60 days for local government elections because they have a fixed date.
Yep.
And for non-fixed term election, being a state or federal election, it's from the date of the writ or notice.
I'm not an expert on state politics, but I thought we had fixed term elections from 2016. There was a plebiscite or referendum where it introduced that. Is that not correct?
We've had a look at other jurisdictions and the way that they frame the timeframes in relation to elections and based on the external legal advice we've had as well. We've been provided that this is probably the best way forward for certainty. So
okay.
In terms of legal framing, so that's all I could possibly observe. Yeah.
Okay, so for local, it's 60 days. I definitely know local's fixed term. Federal's non-fixed term, and that doesn't have a 60-day rule. It's from the date of the right. Is that correct?
The writ, correct.
The writ. So I looked up the last federal election, and there was a 41-day difference between the date of the writ and the election day for the last federal election. Yet local government elections would have a 60-day time rather than 41-day. So I believe that if the focus, which has to legally be focused on safety and amenity, that focus is questioned when we have differential time periods for different sorts of elections, because there's no reason why a federal government election sign would be more of a risk to safety than a local government election sign, despite them having a smaller time period. So I think that making motions on the go and discussing this as if it's a political compromise is definitely something we don't want to do. And I have a concern around this motion because it seems and it feels like it wasn't as orderly as our previous discussion regarding this for such an important item.
Thank you, Councillor Heremiah. Councillor Wilcox.
Thanks. Pardon my ignorance on this one. With the local government elections, we have a fixed date. Do they actually call it beforehand? So next year, it won't be on the proposed date because it actually falls on Easter Saturday. I know there's discussion at the moment. I'm not sure if they've set the date, if it's the 16th or the 21st, I think it is, like the week before. So what happens then? Do they call it? Like, part of my ignorance on this one.
Through you, Madam Chair, under the Local Government Electoral Act, there is actually a defined term which is called the election period, and it starts on the day when public notice is given as to the holding of the election and ends on the day that the polls closes. So the Local Government Electoral Act actually has something called an election period, and that aligns also with the caretaker period. So that's the usual time when campaigning takes place.
And so how many weeks is that? That's roughly 6 weeks, is it?
Through the chair, it is. It can vary, but in my experience, it tends to be between 6 weeks and 8 weeks for a local government election.
So essentially, if councillors are not in favour of 60 days, we could propose that it is put on for the public notice of when the election is called.
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding from listening to the debate is that there was concern raised by the councillors previously about what appeared to be a gap in the subordinate local law and the local law to give the officers the ability to regulate election signage. And one of those issues was around the timing, which is why the officers have put forward Proposal 1, which was about setting an election period time frame within the local law and the subordinate local law. So that's what has been put to you today and what was included in the report. Whether or not that period be a number of days for fixed term elections, or you wanted to resort back to what's defined in the Local Government Electoral Act, which is the election period, is entirely a matter for you. It's just ensuring that for the officers there's an ability to apply the subordinate local law appropriately and say, during this period of time, whatever it is, that election signage is exempt from needing a licence. It's not saying that they can't be put up, but during that period they don't need a licence. Outside of that period, they do need a licence.
Okay, lovely. So basically, we've asked for a time frame. If we don't put a time frame on it, it will be an absolute free-for-all all of the time, no matter what, is what I'm sort of understanding. So I will support Councillor Murphy if she moves this one. I'll second it to go for 60 days. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just a bit confused when people are mentioning that this is a motion on the run. This is the first part of what was in the report. So this is nothing unusual.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. I really appreciate you putting that forward. Everyone who read their reports would be aware of that.
We pulled the second part of the report out. This is just voting for the first part, and it's similar to every other council I'm hearing in a council area, and I don't know, I just don't understand the confusion. So.
Okay, councillors, we have a motion on the floor. The motion has been put forward by Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Wilcox. If you need to take a moment to read the motion, please do. Okay. Can I see by a show of hands your support? This is an amendment to the existing local law. Can I see by a show of hands your support? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That has carried. I'm going to go through the councillors so that the team can actually jot down the notes. How do you vote, Mr Mayor? For. Councillor Bradley?
Against.
Councillor Lane?
Against.
Councillor Russell?
I'll abstain so that I can say it's because I was for no change.
Would you like that as a matter of record? We'll capture that now. Fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Raven?
For with trepidation.
Councillor Hall?
I abstain, and the reason why is yeah, no change, same as Mindy's.
Thank you,
Can I put same as Mindy's?
No, Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall, am I correct that you supported no change? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Fraser.
For.
Councillor Herrmeyer.
Against.
Councillor Bannon.
For.
Councillor Stamp.
For.
Councillor Wilcox.
For.
Councillor Murphy.
For.
Councillor Kerensky is for. Can I just confirm that that has carried? I'm just making sure our numbers all align. Excellent. Thank you, councillors. That motion has carried. Can I just say that I know this has been a tough one. This was actually on from the beginning, shortly after the election last time in 2020. So thank you to the officers for all of the great work that they've done in bringing this report back to council. And thank you, councillors, also for your consideration of the report. Councillors, that actually brings us to the end of the manager's report. Emily, do you have any general business for the councillors?
None today, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Do you have any general business for the manager? I'm going to kick off with Councillor Bradley and then I'll follow with Councillor Raven. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Through the chair, I've already foreshadowed asking for a report. So when I first started as a councillor, shopping trolleys were a major issue in our streets, in our creeks. I used to forever report it in the Slacks Creek area of Arlington Park. Shopping trolleys being dumped there, collecting rubbish, etc. And I've noticed of late it's actually increasing again. But probably about 8 years ago, I think roughly, Graham Abel, former councillor for Division 5, really pushed for the wheel locks at shopping centres and the coin insertions for shopping centre trolleys, and that was really, really effective. And there was a council resolution back then, and I haven't reported shopping trolleys for years and years and years up until recently. And I believe I actually spoke about this about a year ago, and I was told I was going to get an audit, but I think it happened in Council Lane's area, not mine, not Division 1. But yeah, I'm forever reporting it. It is just, it's probably increasingly 30 to 50% of what I report happening in the in Division 1. So we've got Bunnings trolleys from Underwood in Springwood. We've got Coles, we've got Woolworths. And I really don't think it is in my opinion, I think that proactive response of council was very effective. I do not believe that reactive responses are what is needed. I think that proactive checking that the shopping centres are complying. So hence why I've asked for a report on where that is all at. It's not to have a go at the officers or anything like that. It's just something I have observed in in the history of over 15, or in 15 years, I should say, as a councillor. So, yeah, I'm not sure, is it going to go up at all?
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I'd just like to ask Emily, I know that her team was doing some work on this, so can you enlighten us on where you're up to with all of that, Emily?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bradley, for raising this matter. I really welcome the opportunity to say a few words in relation to it. So there's no doubt in my mind that issues like abandoned vehicles, unlawful advertising signage, and abandoned shopping trolleys are a major source of visual pollution which impacts city image. So in Division 1 and Division 2, we have recently conducted extensive auditing, monitoring and enforcement work over the past 12 months. We've written to retailers asking them to safeguard their containment systems. However, it's not enough. The retailers themselves often find their shopping trolleys are stolen and dumped by individuals unknown. So with the fast-paced growth of the city, which has increased the Safe City program's workload by over 100% just over the past 3 years alone, Council does not have the resources to undertake proactive surveillance for shopping trolleys. So, and I'd observe it's usually impossible to catch any individual who's committing acts of that nature. So. It's with that in mind, though, I would like to, bearing in mind, the high levels of workload, the City Standards and Animal Care Branch have prepared a service enhancement for the upcoming budget process, which is essentially a rapid response task force which tackles city image issues such as trolleys, abandoned vehicles, unlawful signs, which have an immediately negative visual impact on the city. To ensure that these things are taken off our street within 24 hours, because our current resourcing levels simply cannot bear proactive work. So being sensitive to workloads, while we can prepare a further report in relation to this service, we could prepare a policy paper or feasibility study. It will come at increased cost to the organisation. So Councillor Bradley, I'd welcome your consideration and Council's consideration of the service enhancement as it comes up over the next couple of weeks in response to this general business item. Of course, if there's any specific concerns you have about specific retailers, please let us know and we can investigate those in the interim.
Emily, can I ask a question? Councillor Bradley's got a motion that's up on the board behind us at the moment that I think everyone can see. Do you anticipate the budget enhancement proposal that you're putting forward will address this issue that's on the board behind me?
That is correct, I do.
Okay,
can I respond, please?
Yes, you can, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. What you have stated, and I'm very grateful for what you have stated, Emily, thank you for that. But that is not what I'm asking for. All I'm asking for is a simple report about the shopping centres in our city, because something I have observed in history is not being complied with. It's not, the shopping centres are not doing their job. They're not doing that, what is in that council resolution from many years ago. So that's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for a rapid response at all, zero, not even asking for that. So it's a very different thing. You're asking for a reactive thing, I'm asking for the proactive. So anyway, I'll move it, and if it doesn't get up, it doesn't get up, that's fine. I've spoken publicly about this, it's an issue. I've spoken twice about it in this committee room, a year ago and today, and it's getting increasingly so.
Councillor Bannon, do you have a question in relation to this issue?
Oh, in a way I do, because
yes, please, go ahead.
A report's not simple. A report's staff time, and it costs money to do reports. So I'm just, I'm thinking of what you just said, that you're under the pump already, and the budget's about to come in your whole department. So there's a report. I know you want to put a report in, but it's they're not simple. It takes time, staff, money. Yeah, just remind people of that.
Emily, can I just ask a question? Do you have any idea how much it might cost to bring a report of this nature back to council, and in what time frame do you think you could bring it back to council?
Thank you for this question, and it is a fair observation that the team has experienced unprecedented workloads with the growth of the city. So our ability to deliver policy reform and review is constrained by those resourcing implications. It sounds like, Councillor Bradley, and we fully acknowledge this is a challenge, we are really trying to tackle it through a proactive approach through the budget process, but it sounds like if the motion is to conduct a review of all retailers in Logan City and their degree of compliance with the local law as it relates to shopping trolley containment systems, that's a fairly intensive piece of work. I'd imagine that the cost, we'd have to allocate a policy officer, for say a 2 to 3 month period, and it wouldn't, come under probably about $10,000 to $20,000. I'd imagine we'd be able to deliver that within 6 months. But I am observing that there is a cost. It sits over and above the typical workload of the team, and we'd be happy to accommodate it, but it will take a little bit of time to come back.
Any further questions, Councillor Bannon? Okay, thank you. Councillor Hall?
Thank you, through the chair. Not a question for you. A question for Councillor Bradley. How often do you meet with the management of your shopping centres?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Bradley, yes.
Yeah, thank you. The major shopping centres are developing at the moment, so I do not feel comfortable meeting with them. They're also donators of former mayoral candidates, so I definitely do not feel comfortable meeting. But can I just say, I want this on the record that I've put this up, that I've advocated on behalf of my community. If this gets lost, well, so be it.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll look for a seconder in a moment, but I'll give everybody an opportunity to speak. I'm just a little confused because from what I'm hearing, I understood that this would be considered as part of a budget amendment, but what you're saying is that you're actually looking at council enforcing the original recommendation, and that you feel that that's not being satisfied at this point in time.
No, that you're right.
And
it is not being enforced.
That's what you're saying. And so what I've heard from the officers is that they can go and do an audit, contact all of the various shopping centres and so on, and that will come at a cost of about $10,000 to $20,000 for council. So I just want to be clear what we're voting on. That's all I want to understand.
We vote, well, if it gets up.
Can I just say this is very broad.
It's a report. That's
but
all
the
it's
report's
asking
very
for.
broad. That's
Yeah.
the difficulty. So I'm trying to make sure the officers understand clearly what it is you're asking of them.
Okay, I have an issue. It's not being addressed. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay, that's not clearly articulated in the ask in the report though. So specifically, what would you like the officers to do?
Provide a solution. That's all. A solution to the issue.
Isn't that what's coming forward in the budget amendment? Okay, I'm sorry, I accept I don't understand. Okay, I've got in front of me, I've got the Mayor and Councillor Wilcox. I'll allow the Mayor to go first, then Councillor Wilcox, then Councillor Fraser, then Councillor Hall.
Thank you.
I beg your pardon, Teresa, I have you up the top. I've got you here already. You're actually next after the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with you in regards to the wording there, and but I understand Councillor Bradley's concern, and obviously she's experiencing a problem in her electorate. I don't know whether that is a problem throughout the city. I don't know, because I'll be honest, these things tend to end up in local creeks and very isolated areas, and councillors would be familiar with it or getting complaints about it. But what I would like to do with Councillor Bradley is offer the opportunity of maybe tightening up the resolution to maybe, rather than, because I do realise that there could be development issues regarding this, in particular I think there may have been conditions in previous shopping centres where conditions were approved with those shopping trolleys, but you've got to be mindful of the fact that that would only be the new shopping centres. The majority of shopping centres in the city were in actual fact approved before this came into place, so there would be no placement on them to put that in place. So what I'm suggesting, if you're happy, is maybe just to reword this so that the report be prepared to a future City Lifestyle Committee, asking to investigate whether or not there has been an increase in shopping trolley abandonments or something of that similar. Because the thing is, one, you're only looking at your own electorate. Two, we've got to identify whether or not it's a problem throughout the city, what are the issues and why it's happening, so that it's sort of centred on finding what is the problem and then addressing the problem later on. So some simple wording changing just to give it a bit more direction, that's all I'm suggesting. And I just wonder whether or not councillors have got any problems with that wording change.
Mr. Mayor, we're writing that up now.
Yep.
But now that I have the powers of the chair, and I was so graciously skipped over from finishing my question to the councillor Bradley, I asked how often she met with the management of her shopping centres in her area, because I actually meet with the management of the owners of the shopping centres in my area pretty much once every 2 months, and I do so with the local sergeant for one of my police stations. And during those meetings, the police sergeant actually brings up whenever there's shopping trolleys or things from the shopping centres that have gone missing, and the managers there, they write it down and say, yeah, we'll make sure that gets collected and taken care of. So this issue can actually be addressed by the management of these shopping centres if there's a process in where you're engaging with the owner of those businesses. It's not the case that we need to put in a local law to have this issue addressed. All we need to do is communicate with the businesses that are operating within our divisions and with the local police that are in our divisions. And Teresa knows for a fact that I meet at the police station in her area. Always in her area. But so I think there's other ways that we can go around this without having to write up policy for local law. But I'm happy to hear the room. Laurie's back, so I think I'll put her back on the podium.
So while you're away...
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Nature called, I'm afraid. So we've gone down through everyone. Did we get through everyone?
Can I just say...
I was optimistic, wasn't I?
I'm trying to circumvent, obviously, this going on too long, and I've put, with the agreement of Councillor Bradley, I've put new wording into a resolution that's up there now. And I understand I don't want to stop debate or anything, but there might be an interest of just getting this over and done with, because we've got another committee after this. I was just suggesting whether or not that new change may dilute the debate and maybe get it through or not. But
well, in the first instance, I'd have to ask Councillor Bradley if that's an amendment she wants to make.
Thank you, through the chair. Look, I don't know if it's an issue in other areas of the city, and obviously from people balking and objecting to an issue that I have, it's possibly not. But I've raised an issue. I raised it a year ago. It is getting increasingly an issue. That's why I'm here, to raise issues on behalf of constituents I represent.
I'll take that as a no. You don't support the Mayor's alternate motion. Moving on, Councillor Lane, you were next.
Thanks very much, through you, Madam Chair. Emily, I've got a few questions. I also have the problem of trolleys in my division, and I came to you a year ago. I'm not certain what happened with Councillor Bradley and her request, but you actually undertook an audit that showed that all of the shopping centres in my area were complying with the locking devices on new trolleys as well as older trolleys. I don't know whether that audit extended to Bunnings. Councillor Bradley raised the issue of Bunnings trolleys ending up in her area, so I was just curious about that. But mostly, I don't know that the interlocking devices are actually the cure anymore, because despite interlocking devices, they're on quite a few corners in my area. The one thing that did happen when the local laws were changed about the shopping trolleys, our local shopping centre had a person that went around the streets with a big trailer and picked up all of the trolleys when they were reported. Was that a condition of the local law changes back in the day, or was that just something they did voluntarily in my area?
Good question, thank you. I'd have to come back to you on those specifics, because that law changed some time ago. If I may make a few observations, we undertook an audit over the past 12 months in both Division 1 and Division 2 to the extent that we could around the scale of the problem, because we are listening and we are really keen to tackle this issue. We did engage with retailers and, you know, potentially I'd have to come back on whether Bunnings specifically, what the outcome was there. But we did engage with retailers, reminding them of their statutory obligations to have a containment system in place. We do believe that behaviours within the community around stealing trolleys, you know, dumping them, they're very unfortunate, but they're beyond the control of the retailers. And to the extent that interlocking devices are not working, we believe they do work to a large degree, but there's always a small minority of people who do the wrong thing. So the issue is, you know, potentially around the public behaviour. So it's in that regard that we looked at. And I will note here as well, just looking at our data, we haven't received sort of significant increases in complaints around shopping trolleys. We have, across all amenity areas generally, shopping trolleys have remained fairly contained. So that's not to underplay the problem, because we see it out there as well. But we haven't seen sort of really escalations in shopping trolleys requiring more of an interventionist approach. So I will just make that observation. But we are seeing across the board issues like advertising signage, abandoned vehicles and trolleys, which have an immediately negative effect. We do want to be proactive in tackling those things, and that's why we've put forward a budget submission for this very issue. So we are listening. And Councillor Bradley, I'd be really happy to meet with you about Bunnings specifically.
One more question, if that's okay, Madam Chair. Emily, is there a rule or a law that says once a abandoned trolley has been reported, that shopping centres have a specific period of time to retrieve their property?
I'd have to verify the specifics. I don't have them at hand, but there are rules, there are laws in place about how we impound goods that are found dumped and how the owner of those goods may come and retrieve those goods at a cost. So we do charge release fees for, we don't just it's not a free situation. So if a retailer which has experienced a stolen trolley, for example, that we've picked up, we store it for a period of time and then charge the retailer the release fee. So there is a deterrence built in there.
Okay, councillors, we are venturing away from the original motion that Councillor Bradley's put up, so I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but I'm going to allow Councillor Wilcox, Councillor Fraser and Councillor Hall to have a couple of brief comments before we do. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you very much. I'll applaud Councillor Bradley for bringing back her constituents' concerns to council, but I can't support this. I don't have an issue in my area, so if that motion was to get up, I'd like Division 11 removed. I don't want the officers investigating and coming out to my area to find that there really is no need for it in my area, and that sort of thing. I've only got 3 supermarkets. The trolleys really don't go walkabout, and when they do go walkabout, I've got a good relationship with my store owners, and I'll walk in there and go, hey, do you know there's a trolley up at Covella? Do you know there's one down at Everleigh? Yada, 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 and they'll go and collect them and stuff like that. And I do notice that when I'm at Browns Plains, because I'm there every other day, those tractors and those trailers are driving around the suburban streets and they're picking them up. So, and I actually can't really, I don't want to talk on behalf of you, but I can't really see an issue down in the Browns Plains vicinity either and that sort of thing. So I won't support this unless Division 11 is removed.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser.
So I got one comment and one question. So I'll talk about my area. Browns Plains is usually pretty good immediately around the shopping centre, but yeah, you can't regulate people's behaviour. They do what they do, even if they've got locks, they'll still find a way to push them around. So the next one, I'd like to know the details of that original resolution that Councillor Bradley cited. So I'd like to know, you know, what the resolution was about. So things like, was it a temporary or a forever campaign or a time frame, and were there temporary staff increases and stuff like that, or what were the details? Because that'll that'll sort of determine what happens, I guess, next.
If I can just jump in, just bearing in mind that the council officers haven't come prepared today to answer detailed questions about shopping trolleys. That being said, I might ask Sherry and Emily if they can actually collate that information and email that around to all councillors so you can have a read of that. Okay, is that all right, Emily? That's
Certainly.
Okay. Can you
Happy
collate
to.
that? Thank
Happy
you.
to. It was a decision in 2011. So.
Fantastic. Councillor Hall, did you actually say what you wanted to say earlier?
Through the chair, look, I just kind of feel like sometimes when residents come to us, we usually take it straight to council, and sometimes there's alternative approaches we can take. We don't always need to poke the bear that is council. Sometimes we can go to these businesses and voice the complaints that our residents are putting straight onto the business, and I think that's probably a more cost-effective approach to handling situations like this. Because there's no expense to the ratepayer for doing that. Yeah, that's something you can do for free. So I think that it's a case that perhaps being the advocate that she is, maybe she needs to advocate to these businesses rather than advocate directly to council because what happens is we end up spreading things too thin, and the power of council becomes like butter because it's just been spread out so far. I think we just need to put some clarity and focus as to exactly what we're here for. As representatives and what council's here for the community. Okay,
councillors. Councillor Bradley has put a motion up on the board. That motion's going up as is at the moment. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Bradley's motion? I have a seconder with Councillor Lane. Can I see by a show of hands all those who are supportive of the motion? And for the minute clerk, we've got Councillor Bradley, Mayor Power, Councillor Lane and Councillor Heremiah. Can I see by a show of hands those who are against? All other remaining councillors are against. That motion has been lost. Mr Mayor, you wanted to foreshadow a second motion. Do you want to put that up? Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. We'll just move to the second motion. Okay, I'll just give everyone a moment to read the second motion. So Mr Mayor has moved. Sorry, you've got the word amendment at the top. Is this an independent motion now? That's okay. Yes.
So just increase in shopping trolleys doesn't indicate that they're dumped. So that so you would just start counting the number of trolleys at every shopping centre. So maybe we just say dumped shopping trolleys.
Sure. Councillor Bradley, you're happy with
abandoned shopping trolleys? Abandoned.
Thank you.
Lost. I did use the word abandoned.
All right. Have we added the word abandon? Excellent. So the Mayor has put the motion forward. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Can I see by a show of hands those who support the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'll support that too. That's 9. Okay, can I please see by a show of hands those who are against? Okay. I'll just take a moment so everyone can get across. Got what you need? Thank you, councillors. That motion has carried. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, team. And I do look forward to seeing that come up as a budget item as well. I've got general business from Councillor Lane, followed by Councillor Raven. General business for the manager.
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry. It just took so long, it completely left my mind. Yeah, can you skip me and come back?
I have general business from Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Emily, is just flipping back to our election signage, is there a service enhancement coming up in regards to enforcement on that, like getting you some extra resources? Because I know that now that you've got 60 days, if anyone starts putting anything out early, you're going to need more resources to go pull them back in. So is that coming forward to council to consider for this budget round?
Thank you for that question. No, it's not contemplated as part of this budget round. Our service enhancement that I just spoke to, it relates to unlawful sort of advertising signage of the roof restoration type signage that we've been seeing, shopping trolleys and abandoned vehicles. But going back to September last year, councillors specifically voted against increasing resourcing around election signs. So we are not proposing to increase enforcement around election signs as part of the budget process.
Okay. I might just bring up a motion to test that later on. Thank you.
Perhaps on another day, Councillor. That would be great. Okay, thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thank you very much, and good job prompting me. Okay, so we've had an absolute explosion in small signs all over public assets throughout my division, and I'm not sure about other areas. I will say a big thank you to your team. They're very reactive when I do report them. Sherry, you do an amazing job and lead a great team. I'm very appreciative, but for every sign that you pull down, there's 5 more coming back. Do we have the capacity to name and shame and actually price the cost to council of these illegal commercial activities being undertaken on public land?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for the feedback for the team. They do an incredible job in trying to tackle what is a very difficult issue based on unprecedented city growth. So we are seeing more of these, and that's why we've put up a service enhancement specifically to enable us to be more proactive in simply taking signs down. Following our briefing recently to councillors on our enforcement pilot as it relates to advertising signage, we have prepared some marketing materials that will go in the Our Logan magazine, specifically relating to advertising signage and what may happen if unlawful advertising devices are displayed. So I think it's really a question of, you know, how far do we build on that? I know councillors wanted to take a fairly conservative approach, but we're trialling a range of options here to tackle the issue. And I'd welcome councillors' consideration of the service enhancement as it comes up, because it is squarely aiming to tackle this very issue.
Thanks very much, because roof restoration signs at $5,900 a pop, how much are we fining them for having those illegal signs all over the community?
We are fining where we can. I think I just have to defer to my colleague for the exact amount.
Thanks, Councillor Lane. Through the chair, normally with the first nuisance offence, the penalty is actually relatively low. It's roughly around $170. And if it's a repeat offender, then we can have 5 units of fine, which is around $700. But that's very rare, because with those roof restoration signs, what we realize is that they use multiple mobile numbers, and they don't take phone calls, and you can check them on ISIC search as well. So recently we have made a bit of a progress that when the officers patrolling the streets, they've identified an individual installing signs, and we have been tracking that person down, try to pursue with some enforcement actions. But currently, just with how these businesses are operated, it's very difficult to find a responsible person that we can take on hardcore enforcement actions. So just following on that enforcement strategy on illegal advertising signs. So we have asked the team basically changed their approach since pretty much January this year by taking as many down as possible and dispose of them immediately, rather than trying to investigate, because that takes much longer to resolve the issue. We want to kind of hurt their pocket by taking as many down as possible, and don't give them the opportunity to advertise the business for such a cheap price.
I love your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors. Do we have any other items for the manager? Councillor Bradley.
Sorry that you had to sigh there through the chair.
My apologies, Councillor Bradley. What I really mean is we've all been at this for about 3 hours. I'm sure we're all getting weary, so thank you. Please present your item.
Thank you. I want to thank you too, because those roof restoration signs I've been jumping up and down about as well. I noticed that they're also in other cities, not just our city, and I thought they were being fined. I'm really disappointed actually to find out that that's not the case. Is there anything stopping us publicly shaming, having, taking photos and putting on social media? Is there anything stopping us doing that?
If I may respond to that, we a month ago came to, I believe it was Councillor Briefing or SLT, and presented an update on the enforcement strategy that we have. We're now 6 months into that, and as Sherry spoke to, we've had some real success in taking down signs, disrupting those types of activities and finding people where we can. So it's simply not the case that we're not finding people. It is the case that we are finding people where we can discover who they are. As part of that strategy, we're also working, we've got an action to work with the Department of Fair Trading, which regulate itinerant vendor activities. So this is a challenge nationwide. It's not just a challenge in Logan, but we really want to share intelligence to find out who's behind this, so we can apply further punitive measures. But at the moment, we find that the best method of dealing with this challenge is simply to be disruptive and take the signs down, not give people the opportunity to comply, but simply remove the signs and dispose of them.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, but to answer my question, are we allowed to, is there anything stopping us publicly saying something?
Council has to, thank you for the clarity, Council has to be mindful of due process whenever taking enforcement action against any individuals. So we would have to be very careful about publicly naming and shaming parties that have not been subject to a court process, and I'd strongly caution against it.
Thank you. Do any other councillors have any general business for the manager? There being none, Brad, do you have any general business for the councillor? Councillors, do you have any general business for the director? There being none, I would like to just thank all the councillors and all the officers for their hard work today. This was a particularly long committee, 3 hours, so thank you for your attention, and thank you for also your attention to all of your committee reports before you arrived today. It makes the process a whole lot easier. That being said, I now declare the meeting closed at 12:01 p.m. and the City Governance Committee meeting will convene at 12:11 p.m. Thanks, everyone.